Testing the audio by going because YouTube still doesn't do the fucking shit right. It used to do it better, and now you can't do it without testing your audio. I should get music though. Like we talked about that last time. I should really use my music that was made for the show. I'll get a beginning slate soon. Don't worry. It'll be actually somewhat professional. But don't if we do get professional, I'll have to offset it by making many more cock and cunt jokes. So just prepare for that, everybody in the audience. Just I'm putting it out there. Disclaimer, because I can't be too professional. Just so with that being said, that lovely introduction. This is going to be a discussion on libertarian philosophy specifically. How it can apply to the party will be a part of it, but I think generally we're going to discuss mostly like the philosophy, and like my particular bent, of course, is anarchist libertarianism. Rose is as well. We both come from a similar pseudo-agorist thing. Hody is as well. And I think Jason is also an anarchist. So we've got 4 anarchists, and I understand the other 2 are minarchists. So or maybe not. Like, I'm going to give you guys full reign to fully describe what you believe. But either way, like, we'll be discussing a variety of opinions here, a variety of perspectives, and a variety of philosophy. So, with that being said, the 3 people who are new to this channel can introduce themselves first, even though I just did that, because I'm very fast. Let's start with Archie, who does not have camera enabled, but I think was trying... I don't know. We'll figure that out at some point. But you can go first, and then we'll go to Dennis, and then Jason.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I have no camera enabled. So I don't know if I'm even showing up on screen or whatever, but I'm Archie Flower. Most often on the Fakertarians podcast, if I'm on a podcast, former state chair of Vermont. I joined the LP during the 2016 Trump versus Hillary, oh my God, the world is ending election.
The most important election of our lifetimes! Sorry, I had to.
I left the LP because of the Mises Caucus kicking me out of Vermont, and that was fun. But I've been a libertarian philosophically for as long as I can remember. The issue that got me politically active was the Fourth Amendment. The Vermont Supreme Court actually upheld a conviction where the Vermont State Police used a camera on a guy's property to film him growing weed without a warrant. So I saw that and I'm like, this is outrageous. And I started studying, and then I found the Federalist Papers, and then I found libertarian thinkers, and here I am.
And then we'll move to Dennis.
Yeah, my name is Brian Hold. It's my non-government assigned name. Been writing about libertarianism since the late 80s. Some of the writing you can find at ryanhold.org. Joined the LP in the mid-90s, 94, 95 sometime, once I found out what a libertarian was. I had always said that I was always a libertarian, but I never knew what that meant until somebody said, hey, you sound like a libertarian. So I'm like, okay, what's that? And I looked it up. Back when we were first getting the internet, I was able to look that up and find out what that was. So I was a co-host for We Are Libertarians for a little while, which is now, I guess, Chris Spangel's show. And I'm also a co-host for Low Key Wall with Harry Price and Vincent. And I also have my own podcast called Plinta Nerd, which has been on a 10-year hiatus and it's coming back soon, hopefully.
Cool.
So I've been a district rep for the state party in Indiana, and I'm now a county chair as well.
Jason.
Yeah, I'm Jason, and I was really mostly just a statist until I was in my mid-40s. I served in the military for about 12 years.
Sorry for your loss.
Got duped, man. I mean, I don't even know what else to say. It's just how I bought the whole thing. I was a statist,
Yeah, you just
I
I
went
want
into
to
the system.
I want to normalize saying instead of thank you for your service, sorry for your loss. Go ahead.
So, after I got out of the military and stuff and got me a 9-to-5 and everything, started having issues with PTSD and had a mental break.
Yeah.
Anyway, after that, gave me some free time to sit down and read some things like the Constitution, and I had some questions about it. And then that led into reading other books and some philosophy. Joined the Libertarian Party for a while and was an organizer. Did social media organizing and a few other things for him until you just evolve in this shit. How long is it from being a libertarian to an anarchist? 6 months or so. Anyway, once I got there into the logical conclusions of things and started looking at the fundamentals of philosophy and behaviors and things, that's kind of where I'm at right now, still evolving. But
good.
Yeah, I advocate as much statelessness as I think society can tolerate at the moment.
And then we'll move to Rose and Hody, and then I'll suck my cock for a second and talk about my history.
Once again, getting us demonetized.
Absolutely.
We have to move our streams to OnlyFans just because it's the only place we can from everywhere. So I'm Rose. By now, you all probably know me. So I have been an anarchist from, as early as I can remember. By age 15, I was reading Emma Goldman and Kropotkin. Currently, I would identify as more of like a market anarchist, and like a Roderick T. Long type. Let's see. I also identified as a small L libertarian because I found the party to be an embarrassment for as long as I knew what libertarian meant, I found the party to be an embarrassment. Joined the party eventually in 2020 because of the Mises Caucus, so this should be fun. Currently, New York State Committee and National Platform Committee.
Very cool. And we'll see if this stream can put you over the edge and see if they can get you to national. Well, fingers crossed. Hody.
I'm Hody Johns. I've introduced myself a few times on the show, but since we're talking about like our roots, I came through the Republican Party. I was a strategist out in Colorado. I was with the College Republicans. Did some unfortunately good work for them out there. And then when the whole Tea Party thing went down, I was really excited because it looked like, we're actually going to be serious about economics and we're going to stop being wrong on all the social issues. Nah, that turned out they were like, hey, thanks for all the votes. Now we're going to forget all the cool stuff that you guys talked about. The RNC itself, I have an article about this actually, would challenge our own candidate signatures and everything like that. So anybody that thinks that they can try to turn the Republican or Democrat Party, I welcome you to try. However, I have firsthand seen what happens. After that, I looked into the Libertarian Party. And then after kind of the culture got no fun with the Mises Caucus kind of doing what they did, I left and I focused on cultural stuff, and that has just been fantastic. The party would have to become a real force for good for me to stop doing what I'm doing. And maybe that's even more a sign about who I am as a person. Maybe I'm just not a very political creature, and I would accept that as well. But I'm happy to be here.
Cool. All right. People who've been watching this channel already know my shtick, but I was PseudoFashy in high school because I was trying to impress my dad. And so I took really conservative positions that I'm no longer proud of. I became I became interested in the Libertarian Party because of my mother, who now rejects association with that particular part of my life. She's happy with some of my beliefs, but let's just say, there's a rub when I start talking about insurrection. So, the general vibe is I was very fashy, then less fashy, then like much less fashy, and as a result of sort of a lot of conversations, moving through the Libertarian Party, talking with a lot of people affiliated with YAL, I became a sort of like unofficial like Libertarian Party recruiter, helping with like, you know, activism. I ran a Young Americans for Liberty chapter for a long time, and I did tabling and shit. And I was doing the world's smallest political quiz and saying, hey, David Nolan is great. I no longer believe that, but that's something that I can get into shortly. But the general vibe is that I did that for long enough to hate it, and hate a lot of the people involved in it. And now I'm a seething, raging ball of hatred that's gotten worse ever since. And, like, generally speaking, I started to look into the roots of these things, found out how fashy they were. Maybe, like, 8 years ago, I started to actively seek out working with leftists who I previously called commies and said that you should, you know, fucking very... I was already basically a boomer at that age, and I had to unboomerify myself. And so I did that. I took this slow... Hope you're okay there. Yeah. I took this slow sort of plunge into lefty culture. And now I'm that lefty according to a lot of people, even though I still support a lot of right-wing people and some right-wing positions. I am now a lefty according to a lot of people, which I don't fucking care if they want to call me that, because a lot of leftist positions are actually pretty based, and a lot of leftist people are getting shit done. So I'm going to follow my conscience, and anybody who doesn't like that can suck my asshole out. That's my story. Welcome to my stream. This is very... like, there can be people who are more hinged, but I am not that one. So, with all that being said, let's start then talking about that. Because I think the party versus non-party issue is, like, a core sticking point for a lot of libertarians. And a core reason that a lot of libertarians, like, take certain positions versus other positions. I see you shaking your head, though, Dennis, so I'm curious. You can start.
No, I'm trying to figure out why my audio is coming from a different source. So I'm just
is that where that
mad at myself right now. I wasn't saying anything about what you're saying right there.
You
Sorry.
do sound fine. Like your voice is not ugly. Yeah. I promise.
All right. It's not going through my mixer with all this stuff, and it looks like it's going through a different camera, or different.
Well, whatever is going through, the only weirdness is a little bit of weird, like, chirping-ish kind of thing, but I don't care, and anybody who does can suck my asshole out. Anyway,
well, the guy on Discord who complained about, there's a buzzing sound. I can't watch any of this.
Yeah, right? Well, and there was a buzzing sound, and I do need to figure that out, and, like...
There was that bad.
Yeah. And like, also, like... it's easy to fix, so it is a reasonable criticism, but, like, it was still listenable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think I got it, if that helps, if that sounds better or worse.
It does. It's
much deeper.
It's not, it's still not ugly, but it's more not ugly. There you go. There's your Orwellian Newspeak version of that statement.
Okay, so what was...
thank Big Brother.
Yes, right. So basically, like, the division between, because I guess then you weren't shaking your head at that. We'll talk about, so Rose is interested in this particular, we were talking about basically the division between party or not party.
Damn.
So if you wanted to head that off, you could.
The party is just a mechanism for enacting specific political change. It's not really anything to do with libertarianism as a concept or a social change mechanism we want to use. I always have this process where my thought is that we need to, as libertarians, we want to change government. We want to change so that these things that we're doing with the government, we aren't doing with the government anymore. And my solution to that is to realize that a lot of the services that the government is trying to provide are things that actually still need to exist, but they shouldn't be involved in the government in any way, because then you can eliminate the politics from it. Like anything to help people, like a welfare type thing, that shouldn't be run through government. That should be done through just people acting out and helping other people voluntarily. And the best way to do that is to go out and build those systems and put them in place, show that they work. Once they work, and you can prove that they work, people are more likely to say, well, why are we spending, why do we have the government doing it? This also, it's double effort, and this works better. So let's get rid of out of the government. And that's how you make change in government and bring government down out of our lives, by going out and doing that ahead of time and not trying to go, let's get rid of all this stuff out of government and then we'll figure it out later. And that's where I think a lot of libertarians fall into the problem with, is that they think that they can just get rid of the government and everything will work out. And that's not how things work. And you're not going to get people to buy in on that, because people at the end of the day just want to be able to go to their job, come home, take care of their family, and make sure there's no chaos in their lives. And when you start talking about, we're going to rip all this stuff out that a lot of people depend upon for their livelihood and getting by in life for assistance, and say we don't have an answer for you on how that's going to work, that scares them. They're not going to come from that. You go out and you do it, you prove that it works, then they're more likely to say, yeah, let's do that way, because that makes more sense. And that's how you enact change. So the Libertarian Party is useful as a mechanism to get that word out, to help coordinate that stuff, and to get some people into office, hopefully, that can make those changes, especially at local levels. But at the end of the day, it's our action, ourselves doing this work, that's really going to be what makes the change and makes a difference.
I make that point a lot. Just, I'll say this, Rose, you can go immediately after me. That's what I want. I want people to actually prove that this stuff works. And I've said it exactly that way too. Like, prove that this stuff works by doing it yourself and by doing it on an individual level. And personally, that's why I don't like the party. I think the party, just as all other sort of politicking outlets, is a good way to get, a whole lot of money, time, and energy sunk into a process that doesn't prove that anarchy itself is possible. And that could go just directly to, feeding those who need it, or solving these social problems directly and personally. So that's been my position and appellation from previous streams. The relative of Bigfoot knows that as well. But Rose has a slightly different take on that particularly, I think, maybe. So I will throw it to you. Speak as long as you want.
Oh, no, I mean, I feel like, I more or less agree. Like, I have always viewed the party as, basically a tool for getting like-minded individuals into the same place. So, it's to serve as a front for networking and for education. So the reason I got involved is because I felt like, if it's going to attract the right type of people, it needs to have, strong messaging. It needs to have, a platform that actually properly communicates libertarian principles.
Principle? In the party of principle? Sorry,
it is way too easy to get caught up in, party bullshit, and or for the party to start trying to pretend that it's a real political party, and then doing stupid shit like hosting conventions in DC, which is ridiculously expensive and inconvenient to travel to when they can't afford to, actually have the money to fly like delegates there and, give them an all expenses paid trip the way the two major parties could.
And also, of course, like, from that perspective, like, let's just take this moment to say something that I think we can all agree on across the right to left spectrum here, anarchists and minarchists in this call, fuck Adrian Malagon. Because the way he ran LP California convention was asinine, and also fuck Robert Kennedy Jr.
I'm not going to kink shame, but no.
Would be up to you.
The hot mic with Evans OBrien was a perfect example of just
how
prick he is.
Evans OBrien is so much better than him. Fuck.
Well, he smack talks her while using her photo.
Yes. It's so fucking evil. Like
with her watermark.
Yes. He's such a piece of shit. And, like, everything about that, I think, crystallizes why I fucked off why I'm not doing the party shit anymore, and why the only reason I'm still here, like, talking about the party is to throw rocks from the sidelines.
Well, I do have a comment to say about the messaging thing that was brought up a little bit too, is that I don't think that we should be messaging in a way to find the people who are perfectly like ourselves in order to round them up and get them together. I think we should be messaging in a way that gets people to start thinking about things and come to the realization eventually that this is, the right way to go, because people don't necessarily make 180 degree shifts in their thinking. Mm-hmm. And I think it's more important to get messaging out there, say, hey, this is, there's another way to think about this. How about this? There's another way to think about this subject. How about this? And here are our principles on what we think and why. And I think the basic principle that I have from libertarianism is just that people should be free to live their own lives as they choose, as long as they're not hurting or impacting anybody else from doing the same. And which is straight out of Thomas Jefferson first inauguration, right? I mean, that's the basics of libertarianism, in my opinion. And I think a lot of times we have fallen into a problem in the latter part of the 1900s and early 2000s to think that right-wing populism is part of that mindset as well. And while there's some overlap between those two thought processes, there is a lot of
underlap
problems with the populism. Yeah, there's a lot of problems with populism, both on the left and the right, but especially on the right, because Murray Rothbard and Lee Rockwell kind of convinced a lot of people that they were libertarians when they really weren't. Uh-huh. And so now they think that they're the bastion of libertarian thought. And it's like, yeah, but then the problem with populism is then you end up going against your own stated principles whenever it feels convenient to you or when you think it should be this way. And that's when you get into trouble. And that's when people who are thinking about libertarianism and then like the idea that people should be free to live their lives start going, hey, but what about this stuff? And what about these guys? And you're working with and you're coddling people who are way on the far right of you and are actual racists and bigots and things. What do you do about that? Why you start pushing people away from who could be coming to the message? And that's where you get into a lot of trouble with the way some of the messaging has been and could be and should be, I think, as far as that goes.
Yeah, I've said similar things in the past because a lot of people who are, either new to libertarianism or still, naive, like they'll see messaging coming from the right, paying lip service to individual liberties or free markets. And they'll think, okay, these people are most of the way to libertarianism. We can recruit them, or we could at least ally with them. Problem is, people who come from the right tend to have certain, social hangups that they have, in my experience, a very hard time letting go of. Like, they're libertarian until they have a personal issue with something, and then it's amazing.
So it affects them, or they don't like those people. Yeah. But, and it's funny too, because I see a lot of that with people who. So in the 80s, when the whole Crane thing happened with Rothbard and Crane, the big split between the party in the 80s, a lot of people left the party and said, okay, we're just going to abandon this because this isn't working. We're going to go to the Republican Party and we're going to change it. We're going to change it to be more libertarian. And that's when the Libertarian Caucus or the Liberty Caucus and the Republican Party kind of got started. And that's when you had people like Murray and you ended up with people like Murray and Ron Paul and Lee Rockwell trying to get Pat Buchanan elected as president. And that's like, and praising David Duke and trying to reach out to the side of things, the old right. And that's what really has kind of stained the idea of libertarianism, in my opinion, because they really just tried to work within the Republican side of things, the Republican Party, and make it libertarian or liberty based as they saw it. And that's not going to work.
And
never going to work. It's never worked and never will work.
And real quick, anyone else can jump in on this as well.
Yeah, I'll shut up.
No.
I tend to hog because I do go on some diatribes.
I'm bipolar. I info dump in like every conversation. Like my family calls every week are exactly as unhinged as these calls. I try not to say like cunt around my mom, and I try not to say god damn it around my dad and sister. But like I basically say everything else exactly the same, even with them. Like, so I'm not one to talk. But like, I'm sure that there's like some discord in some places about these statements, but like, I think they're pretty solid so far. If anyone else wants to supplement that as well, I just don't want anybody to feel like they can't. Is it?
I was on a Twitter space the other day about ballot access, and it was really interesting to listen to. I really do want to find an alternative to this word, but everyone's gonna just get it, so I'm gonna use it. It was really interesting listening to normies talking about ballot access, because it's like, being a libertarian, we're all familiar with how the duopoly screws people over for ballot access. But on that space, I got curious about the last time we had a president that wasn't associated with the Democrat or Republican parties. Without Googling, does anybody want to guess which president it was?
Which president or which candidate? Sorry.
Which president we last had that was not a Democrat or Republican?
No idea.
Whig party.
I'm gonna say in
It was gonna be
5,
big before.
4, 3.
Andrew Jackson? Jackson's
Miller
my final answer.
Fillmore.
Oh.
He was a Whig.
Yeah, Whig party. Yeah.
I know that Teddy Roosevelt tried, but I don't think he succeeded off ballot. I think he was because the Rough Riders and that sort of thing. But
Yeah. But in terms of what got them elected, yeah. So we have had so the whole we need to vote for Biden to save democracy, blah 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 blah. Are we really saving anything? Have we had real choice? Like, walk into a podunk convenience store and there's 8 different soft drinks at minimum. There's like, several different breads, lots of different pastries, 4 different pastrami's. There's probably a sushi. Like, there's choice all around us because of the free market. But when it comes to politics, the most important election of our lifetime is just around the corner, and it's always going to be a D or an R.
Well,
and the problem I have with that is that it's our own doing. It's just what the people prefer in their politics. If we didn't want that, because you see all these polls where it's like, I just want another choice between the two that we have. But they don't really, because you have the majority of people saying that. If the majority of people really meant that, they'd go out there and there would be another person. But they don't, because they convince themselves.
I think there's a sort of a symbiotic relationship with that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but it's something that we could do ourselves and we can break out of ourselves. We just choose not to.
So, they'll say they want more, but then
rigged, I don't
also
know.
convinced one is better than the other. So
They want somebody else to come in and fix it for them.
Yeah.
They don't want
That's the problem with statism, isn't it? Is that most people want other people to do things for them instead of just getting up, fucking doing it yourself.
yeah.
Everybody bitches about the quality of your food and stuff, and they have a place that they could be growing the food themselves, but they don't. They just want to bitch about it. They want somebody else to fix the fucking problem at the grocery store.
And the problem is until you can get people out of that mindset, there's really not any kind of hope of having any kind of a stateless society or a or situation where you have more than a duopoly option, because nobody wants to try that hard and do that work because they don't think it matters. They've been told that their voice doesn't matter. They've been told that they don't count, and they believe it now. And because they believe it and they're told it, and then everybody says, well, the only way we can fix this is to change the laws and do this and change, we have to change ourselves, and we have to get people to see that. And I don't see a lot of people out there taking that message to the people to say, this is all up to you. You have the power right now to fix this. You just have to be willing to do it. And that's the only message that's really going to change anything in this society.
I want to say something that's really, it's a harsh statement, but it's my experience living in combat zones for a while is that nobody's going to do anything until it hurts. It's got to hurt, and when it's really painful, that's when people will do something. And and I mean, like watching the kids starve kind of shit. When people get uncomfortable, they're going to change shit.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like
it's either that or you wait for the next generation to evolve society. But if you want rapid change, you're going to have to. I've never seen it happen. Has it happened in history? A rapid change in social structure that wasn't catalyzed by some kind of pain.
no.
I don't know, I would say the civil rights movement or something like that.
That was
a
catalyzed
big
by
change
pain.
in how things were.
That was a pain drive, yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was pain over centuries or decades of pain where people finally just said, I've had enough. And I think that's where if you can get to the people who are in that situation and say, I've had enough, and can
and
get
eventually
themselves
they
in the
stand
mindset that
up.
it's possible, they'll say, yeah. And that's where we need to get to.
Yeah, and like that's, see, for me, part of my transition from like partisan libertarian minarchist to anarchist was I basically I have a consort with a bunch of voices in my head, and we basically decided that if I fucking couldn't watch a bunch of police brutality and war footage and still support the entity that was responsible, I had to be anarchist. And everything since then was just me flowing into that. Like, there were cultural influences, sure. Like, fucking, I mean, I could go on for a very long time about how literally the Sonic franchise helped culturally, like, get me away from things like, fucking statism, and how that and a bunch of other sort of fictional outlets were like, oh yeah, there's an alternate way of thinking, of being, and maybe freedom is a good thing, actually. And so, like, fiction helps. Konkin, Samuel Edward Konkin III made that point. He kept on sharing a bunch of libertarian-leaning science fiction in his free fanzine series that he was printing out of Anarcho Village. I'm stuck with names. And so, like, that helped. And, like, so did a bunch of people online and a bunch of people, like, directing me toward, like, anarchist thinkers, and not all of them were polite, but I still listened to the ones that weren't, because if I can't survive a conversation with someone, I'm a pussy. And then eventually I, like, basically talked to enough of these people that I was like, maybe there's enough to this, and maybe I should just see if I can support this, and if I can't, I have to fuck off. And so off I fucked, because I watched a lot of this stuff, and I came out the other end being like, and I fucking cried watching some of it, just like the casual fucking obscenity of, like, their power. The fact that, especially, something that was especially beneficial to me was watching double tap drone footage, double and triple tap. The fact that they don't give a fuck if they're killing normal people. We're fighting insurgents. It's about terror, freedom. Jack off in a coffee, bitch. You don't care. It doesn't matter. These people aren't on anyone's side that matters. These people are evil. And, like, when I realized that, I was like, I can't support these people and retain any semblance of ethics. And so I was like, yeah, so that was part of my pain point. Also, watching some friends get arrested who didn't deserve it. Watching the school system, like, brutalize people, and realizing eventually that it was because of the reason that the school system exists, like indoctrination, and, well, we gotta beat down those tall nails, we gotta cut those tall blades of grass. And, like, when you realize that, and when you realize that all the social structures are set up to reify that bullshit, it's like, yeah, no wonder we're all fucked.
Mm-hmm.
All in all, it was all just another brick in the wall.
Yes.
Yeah. When I was a kid, like, I remember being in, like, elementary school and being like, okay, why do these teachers get to, just have authority over us by default? Like, what if we all just, like, refused to do the schoolwork? They couldn't do anything, but no one would fucking listen to me. Like, I was insane. So, no, I wasn't exaggerating when I said I was basically born an anarchist. However, like, so I didn't have to become an anarchist. I didn't need convincing. What happened was, around like my early 20s, I had kind of internalized the idea that I was somehow, abnormal. So I basically gaslit myself into becoming a statist. So, I grew up in a family full of normie Democrats. So, and then this was around the time Obama was running for office. So I'm like, okay, this guy doesn't seem so bad. He claims he's, against the wars that the Bush administration started. He says he's going to, end the Patriot Act and close Guantanamo Bay. So I convinced myself, okay, everyone else seems to understand that they have to just vote and make their voice heard. So maybe I'm just wrong about this, and I just need to, endorse this guy and vote for this guy. Thankfully, that stage did not last long. So then I started following. Well, I was actually simultaneously once I realized, okay, no, there's no such thing as using the state for good. I was kind of simultaneously following Ron Paul and Bernie Sanders. Like, I liked what Bernie Sanders was saying, but I also am like, it seems very, unlikely to actually work. So, and then I liked a lot of what Ron Paul was saying, because he would get on stage and, call out the mass murderers, and he would call up the, drug war, and even though he knew he was going to get booed. So he's the one that kind of got me started down the rabbit hole of learning about economics. Yeah. So I spent some time as a minarchist, because I'm like, maybe, if we just follow the Constitution, we could have a country that, we could have a state that protects people's rights, but doesn't, but yeah, that's complete bullshit. That's even more, that's way more utopian than anarchism.
Yeah.
And even if you follow the Constitution, people have to get up and actually do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't enforce itself. The Constitution has to be enforced by the people via the jury. That's where you veto out the shit you don't want. You got to go to the fucking jury.
Look at the last 8 years and see how that's bullshit anyway. The elites just can get away with literal murder. Yep. And you try to get them through the court system, and they find ways around it. They're treated differently. Look at what's happening with Trump now. So it's like you're never going to be able to hold these people accountable because they're the elites of the environment.
Oh, so. And one thing, because I should do this more in my streams. Speaking of Bernie Sanders, I am once again asking for your financial support. Feel free to go to the Patreon bullshit description. And support this content if you like it, share, and subscribe, and that stuff. Hody, you haven't said words in a bit.
No, I appreciate what all of you guys are saying. I appreciate that this is something that I think we mostly have some unity on.
So far, we'll fucking kill each other tomorrow.
Oh, well, yeah, we'll find the things that we disagree on, but no, I appreciate it. I think for me, when I look at what government is at its essence, at its core, and that system of coercion, and of course, if the thing is we want to coerce the baddies, but not coerce the good ones. It's always the idea, right? That we're going to be able to do that. So it's not like when people say, they hear that the government's going to go away. And what we were saying earlier was that's a scary message and probably not the one to lead with if we're going to win. And I really appreciate what Reinhold said at the beginning, which is, we need to make it a functional philosophy before we just make it a reality. This is something that I think the early Christian anarchists understood very well, was that, and this is something that I want to stress to people. We talk about messaging a lot because of our personality types. Libertarian personality types we're very logic argument based. We're very, that's what makes the most sense to us. We're very pragmatic. We believe in praxis. We talk about it a lot. Not all, in fact, most human beings aren't like that. And so the thing is unless you just want to talk philosophy for philosophy's sake, you're going to have to walk the talk well after it's been established that you're right. If being right was all it took, libertarians would have won centuries ago. But being right is not all it takes. And we actually have to be good, and we actually have to be nice, and we actually have to be convincing and be friendly, and all these things that sometimes libertarians are not so good on, being nice and friendly and persuasive. And it's really a shame because we let ourselves down when we do that by thinking they juxtapose logic with being kind, with compassion, as though those two things are mutually exclusive from one another. That if you're logical, then there's no possible way you could be one of those, nice people. If you're nice, there's no way you can be logical. There's no such thing as having both an emotional quotient and an intelligence quotient. And of course there is, obviously, like that's something that can be true. Just libertarians don't like to flex that an awful lot. And so we have these divisions that we see today between libertarians who care about people on an emotional, cultural level, people who care about them on an economic level, and we've been so used to fighting with each other over which one of those gets to have the driver's seat, and ultimately our tent won't be big enough until we realize that both groups need a spot at this driver's seat, that we need people who will be kind and right.
And also, like, just, it's irritating to me when it's so many words. Like, they get to act as though because they said the right words, that they're better than the other people who didn't say the right words or said the wrong words, in their opinion. And so then they get to say, well, the words I said were the right words, so I should, get the praise and attention and shit. Or in the case of vast, like, majority of people in political spaces in general, and unfortunately not that much different in libertarian spaces, they'll also say, whatever they need to in order to court a specific type of person. They'll like audience hunt. They'll rent seek in terms of audiences rather than audience capture is the term I think it is, rather than actually having principle. And because of this, like there's a bunch of people saying a bunch of words and saying that because I say the words, because I have the branding, because I bring awareness to this thing, because I have the proper colors in my whatever the thing, and because I symbolize my greatness, you should also accept my greatness. Because I'm part of the right caucus, because I'm part of the right religious organization, because I'm part of the right, fucking shut the fuck up. And, like, so many of these people, like, I mean, I'll just quote the ever correct lines of Bring Me the Horizon. Give me a break, you deluded, ill-informed, self-serving pricks. If you really believe in the words that you preach, get off your screens and onto the streets. That's it. That's all. And so the thing is, like, that's in a song called Antivist. I used to hate that song because it was about me. And now I'm trying to not be that way anymore. Like, if you're just going to say that you're a professional activist, nobody's going to give a fuck after 10 years, when a lot of the things that you said are gone. Greta Thunberg is going to be gone in 10 years. Like, just nobody's going to care. David Hogg is only relevant recently because fucking Spike Cohen talked to him. Like, nobody gives... So, if you really want to isolate Change for Liberty, fucking act in the vein of liberty. Get off your screens and onto the streets is what I say. That song is great. Fucking, and I can't say the next lines, but I also agree with those because that will get me kicked off YouTube.
I would say that David Hogg still isn't irrelevant. I don't think.
Yeah, probably not.
Unfortunately, he is. Okay,
neither one of them.
Democrats love him.
Right? Yeah, but and libertarians love, for some reason, Spike, but it's like neither one of them have any kind of political cachet to make a blip on the
exactly
on the ass of anything going on today. Nobody talked about it except for a couple of libertarians and a couple of liberals.
And honestly, you want to talk. See, okay, here's where I get to be an asshole for a second and say that one Asian chick in that debate, like, shut it down. Like, there's no reason to still have a debate after what she said, and that could have been the whole of it, but instead, a whole bunch of people got together for their collective watch parties so that they could watch their fattened calves be slaughtered for the purposes of entertainment. Nobody gives a shit. Nothing's gonna change. That did, if anything, that backfired for Hogg because, what happened? The FPC, Firearms Policy Coalition, one of the, actually, I think the only gun organization that currently follows me on Twitter. So shout out to you. They did a big fundraising drive off of it, and their lawsuit printer will be going off the fucking charts because of that. And also, the next day, they did another fundraiser for David Hogg's birthday, and it smashed their records for the previous David Hogg birthday fundraiser. So it's like, you see how, like, to me, this whole thing, it just proves how performative a lot of this stuff is. And the other half of it is that, like, you have all these gun Republican and gun Libertarian, and, you know, we have the night vision optics on our fucking bullshit. I don't believe you because they're already coming and taking it. What the fuck are you doing? They're here at your gates and you're letting them in. You don't care. It's not real. It's an aesthetic you can bumper sticker your truck with.
This is the issue that I've always had with the pro-violence crowd. That's like that thinks that change will become because of violence. Because if you were going to be violent, you'd be doing it right now. Like, let's start off small. Like, remember the Will Smith incident? Like, oh, he smacked, and people are like, I'd smack him in the face. I'm like, people are stealing from your wife right now. People are telling what your wife can do with her body right now. And you're not smacking them in the face. So why in the world would I think that what you're doing is anything except performative when, if you're like, oh, no, I'd smack somebody for disrespecting my woman. People are disrespecting you, your kids, your family, your wife, your grandparents. The government disrespects the heck out of you, and you don't do anything. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people say, like, well, maybe I need to. No, you don't. Listen, you don't need to be violent against them because that's still giving them the control. They want you to be violent. They want you to do something stupid. The best way to go about it is really to be nonviolent and show them that they can't control you. Do what, Food Not Bombs is doing. Like, go out, do the work, feed the people, and let people see, like, oh, I thought I want to paint these guys out to be a bunch of violent idiots that are just looking for an excuse. In reality, what I got was a bunch of intelligent, well-rationed, compassionate, walk-the-talk people. That's what's going to destroy government.
Right. People who say shit like that usually have never actually seen real violence. In fact, most of them look like they've probably never been in a fight in their entire life. It's always when I always say that, I'm like, dude, you look like you've never been in a fight in your life.
You just
you're
fought
not
your McDonald's order and you took a pill so that it'd go down easier. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah. People who have actually people like Jason who have actually, seen real violence are usually the most, against it because they realize, how it actually works.
I'd like to speak on this.
Yeah.
Specifically. So, I think the most powerful protest that the people can make is when they step away from the current structures and start engaging counter economics. That's the real protest. If you want to make changes without going out and throwing rocks through windows and bullshit like that, then hey, start buying your produce from local farmers and avoid taxation at all costs. That means how you buy your things. This is the powerful protest. This is what really is a knee knocker, is taking away funding and power over your life.
Yeah. And like, just to be very specific, don't just Food Not Bombs, Food Not Lawns. Like, actually turn your property into something that you can use. And like, I when I get a place of my own, because right now I'm house sharing with a bunch of people, and it's nightmares quite a bit of the time. It's very useless, and it oftentimes results in like loss of work and a bunch of other shit. I'm not going to go into that too much. I don't recommend it. But if you have to house share with people on the same mission as you is I guess the thing I could say as a sidebar there. But like, when I get a place on my own, there are literally local programs with the government called Spokanescaping. I live in Spokane, Washington. You know what Spokanescaping is? It's drought tolerating your property. And you can do that by putting in drought resistant foods. And you can foodscape and Spokanescape, or whatever your local thing is, because a lot of places have a local thing like that. And you can, at the same time as taking some of your money back from the government who stole it to begin with, you can then also take your property and make it useful, make it impactful, and start, the trade economy, start, building up your own personal stocks so that you can get some agorism up in this bitch and start mutual aiding this shit out and like actually doing some fuck, you know? Like I don't respect politics. They're bureaucrats, Morty. I just, you know, it sucks. Yeah, see? You're on this a similar vibe here. Yeah. Like
wish I was better at gardening. I've tried to grow a vegetable garden like 3 years in a row, and my plants kept dying because they got this powdery mildew stuff all over the leaves. Like, no, first year I tried it, everything went well. Like, we got let's see, the peppers were good, the cucumbers were awesome, the green beans were good, the broccoli I think I let it grow for too long. Like I should have harvested it sooner. But anyway, the next 2 years after that, they all died from powdery mildew.
Yeah, that'll happen.
I just don't have time to maintain a garden, but I know I really should learn and get good at it.
The thing is, though, Rose, you bring up an excellent point, and that's the division of labor is a fantastic thing. We should do what we specialize in. If we have somebody focused on gardening who's good at it, we all can share what they have and then bring what we have to the table to be good at that. This is one of the issues that I have, and I am a capitalist way before I'm like a socialist. But one of the uncomfortable truths that the capitalists need to kind of grapple with is that there have been like 20 different anarchist, socialist, centralized, and not a single anarchist capitalist one. Part of that is because the anarchist capitalists sold out their values, much like how the communists did to Stalin, but they sold out their values to authoritarian leaders. We see that still today with certain leaders where we sell out, where we're like, they're libertarian enough. Sure, go ahead and unleash the police on the homeless. I'm sure at the end of the day, you'll wise up and be a libertarian. But when we keep selling out like that, we don't have this cooperation. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because we talk all the time in capitalism about division of labor and cooperation. Atlas Shrugged is a fantastic novel, and I love it. But you look at how well those individuals coordinate. Now, they say they do out of selfishness or whatever you can say. I'm fine with that. Fine. Say it's out of selfishness. But currently, we are so obsessed with like greed being good that we forget the part that greed is also virtuous. And we just say like, oh, let's make greed like as ugly and evil and nobody can force me to do what. Right. That's not the point. The market is going to make you do it. Right. And so like that's a good thing. So I think what we need to start realizing, if we're going to come together as panarchists, minarchists, small government people, whatever it may be, is understanding not everybody's economic system nobody's is going to be centralized. Everybody is going to establish what they want for themselves. And that's a good thing. We have to stop taking shots at our fellow anarchists, communists, capitalists, socialists, mutualists, whatever, and just say, hey, as long as it's voluntary and this is just an option you're bringing to the table, fantastic. Now, maybe you wouldn't want to do it. I know what makes me an anarcho-capitalist is every description I've ever read about anarcho-communism makes me go, but there are some people who no doubt would love anarcho-communism. And blessed be them. I hope they get what they want. There's no reason why what they want should come at the expense of what I want. And so really, I just think like we need to focus on why it fails. And a lot of that is because we don't want to get along with each other. And we have to. Well,
two things. We have to virtue signal about how we're the only real anarchists. Like the sectarianism really gets me. Yeah, I mean, okay, we can argue all day over whether we think wage labor is inherently exploitative or it's just the current economic system we're under that makes it exploitative. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, in a stateless society, we'll either have it or we won't. Like there's stupid theoretical arguments. Like if you're consistently anti-state and unjust hierarchy, we shouldn't be infighting.
And like two things, and then like because I know Dennis and Archie probably have plenty to say on this subject. Like two things. First off, Atlas Shrugged is a terrible book. It's any book that gives you that much of a speech in the book, any book that gives you that much like traction for your political diatribe. Come on, like every other like dystopian, even by Ayn Rand, every other dystopian book she wrote was better You know, come on. Like, but the other half of it that I'll say, because I know that Hody will want to say something about that. He could talk about that, but like, the two things that I'll say is that, and also this has been a problem. The sellout has been a problem since the inception of the Libertarian Party, as like confirmed by Samuel Edward Konkin III in the New Libertarian Manifesto, where he talked about the fact that the Libertarian Party was part of an attack on libertarian institutions and also an attack on principles and so basically he really went into detail on the coctopus. I heard the term first from him. Also, I prefer calling it the coctopus because it's funny, but like yeah, like
people don't know what you're saying though. They think you're talking about some porn thing.
Yeah, but they can think that too. It's fucking,
I was in that.
It's fucking all of us. So
Could be either one.
Yeah, we should actually make that. We should make that like a protest hentai.
Is there no like, okay, there must be Coctopus Rule 34. Come on, this is the internet.
I would assume there has to be. If there
I'm
isn't,
not Googling for that.
If there isn't, there needs to be. There is some furry out there who we could commission. But anyway, the thing that I wanted to say is that because the Coke money, like family money, is fascist money. It's Nazi money. Fred Koch was a Nazi oil guy, and that's how that family got wealthy. That's how that family got their wealth, and everything downstream from that is just a reification of authoritarian right-wing garbage. And so, like, if you look at the Koch funding, just the giant fucking web, and it's so much worse than it was in the 70s. And Konkin was already right in the 70s. He was already right in the 70s about that attack. But it got so much worse now. And there are so many more Koch-affiliated, like, jack-off organizations. And there are so many organizations that came up as an offshoot of organizations that were Koch-affiliated jack-off organizations. And there are so many other organizations that say the exact same thing as the Koch-affiliated jack-off organizations. And it's like, they're all right-wing. Most of them are authoritarian. Like, many of them are statist. And then they also fund YAL. And then they also fund the original Libertarian Party. And then they also fund a bunch of Libertarian candidates. And also, simultaneously, a bunch of Republican candidates. I wonder if there's some synergy between messaging in Koch-funded camps. And so it's like, when you get this fucking money, and I get shit for bringing it up. Spike Cohen interrupted me and got very angry with me when I brought this up. And all I did is ask him how much of a problem it still is. To deny that the problem exists is insanity. And because he did that, I can't take him seriously. I really can't. And like,
okay, go ahead.
And like, look, I'm talking as a political candidate. I think You Are the Power is probably a very good organization, and I look forward to interviewing like fucking like this person who's also involved in that on Wednesday, if that still happens. Because like, let me be clear, I think I might have curried some bad favor with the Lars folks at this point because of some choice words that I had for them regarding their messaging. And I'll just, yeah, right? I never get into an argument.
I've never seen you be like, difficult.
Yeah, no, never. But like, so the thing that happened there was like, there's this Discord server. I was told to keep it PG, and fine, I won't say the fuck word in your server, but you should keep it also like the rest of the way like kosher. And if you're unwilling to, then don't tell me that I'm the one driving people away because I say the shit word occasionally. Like, I'm not gonna fucking censor myself because you want to make your server an exact place that, like, nobody should be. But, like, either way, point is, like, when people aren't willing to even talk about the Koch funding, see, that's the bipolarism. I start at the end of shit, and then there's a bunch of side shit that comes up. Like, if people aren't even willing to talk about the Koch funding, or the funding from all these other, like, sort of right-wing organizations, a lot of which are also, like, descendant from Nazis. I can't stress that enough. It's so fucking evil. then if you're not even willing to talk about it, you're not serious in anything else you say. And, like, that's my problem with a lot of these libertarians, whether they be establishment Sarweasel types, or whether they be from the takeover, which, by the way, still fuck the Mises Caucus for banning me from their groups and blocking me on social media. That's not how you prove to me.
I agree, it was bullshit.
Yeah, that's not how you
Trust
prove
me,
Yeah.
I've been blocked from most of those people since 2017 when I called them out for even what they were doing back then. Me and Michael Heiss have a very interesting relationship in the fact that he basically just hates us. So,
he and our whole network.
And he's a liar, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, Archie, you wouldn't have anything to add to this subject, would you? Let's just keep going.
No, I get along with Heiss these days. Because he's blocked me.
Yeah.
So he can't hear what I have to say.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Because he's an absolute coward. So so Vermont state law, parties have to reorganize every couple of years. And when I was in charge of that, he actually unblocked me on Twitter to smack talk me. I didn't respond, but that's how he rolls.
Yeah,
You're still in his head. That's good to know.
When he first started his thing, the first thing he did was advertise, join the Mises Caucus. We're going to take over the Libertarian Party and make it libertarian again. Because apparently the people who were in the Libertarian Party, like me, who've been in there for 20, 30 years, wasn't really libertarian, right? So I called him out and said, that's not the way you should be doing this. That's divisive politics. And you can get a quick hit with divisive politics and get a lot of attention real quickly, but it's not going to last. And it's not fruitful in any way. It's just going to cause problems, and you're going to end up splitting the party up. No, I'm not going to do that. Blah blah blah. I was wrong. I was stupid. And then he came out with the 2018 convention and lied about Ron Paul being disinvited from the convention, which never happened. Chris Spangle, who was we were libertarians at the time, called up Daniel Hayes, who was the guy who was at the center of that, had a big old thing, found out that basically Michael Heiss was lying. And ever since then, our network was completely disowned by them, and to the point where they were sending people over, mass reporting our group on Facebook to get it basically banned and pulled off the Facebook. Right? That's how he operates. He operates his way. If you don't like it, if you don't agree with him, you're gone. Even if you're a member of the Mises Caucus, a lot of people who remember the Mises Caucus started questioning him. Immediately, they found themselves on the out, right? On the out group. And so that's not how you run an organization where you're trying to enact social change and convince people that you're, the best way to go by completely destroying anybody who has anything that might be in opposition of what you have to say. That's where we are now, and what really irritates me is that now they're trying to say that all the people who were pushed out and told that they weren't wanted, they weren't libertarian, they weren't needed, we don't want you here. They're gaslighting those people and saying, well, it's because you guys left that we're having problems right now.
Said you committed sabotage.
It's like,
sabotage.
Excuse me. It's like, okay, we won. Now everybody come back together and let's all get along. It's like, no, that's not how that works. And I posted something recently about a thing where it says you can't have you can't get along with people when the people who wronged you are still not willing to accept that they did wrong, right? They have to first say, we were wrong, we harmed you, and we're sorry. Now let's all work together and actually mean it. And that's never going to happen. So it's just a case of they've done this to themselves. They did it. It was the only way this was ever going to happen. It's not the first time it's happened in the Libertarian Party. I remember right before the 2020 or 2022 convention, I had an idea, and Chris and I got together with Steve Doshbach and
I think I saw that episode.
Joe. Basically, all of us had been in the party for over 30 years. There was over 150 years of experience in the Libertarian Party. And we spoke for 2 hours about all the different things that had happened to the party, all the different ways this has been here before, what's going to happen. We called it all out. And just nobody wanted to care about it because we were wrong. We were the bad guys, so it's like we know what we need to do to make this a functional group and work positively towards change. We've done it for decades. We've had our ups and downs because we've had people come in coming in from the Republican Party and trying to take over the whole nomination and things like that. We've had years of that. We had to deal with it. And even today, I found out about a whole movement now, a political movement, not political movement, but like a podcasting movement networking that's run by Cliff Maloney Jr., right? And he's one of the worst. He's a Republican who's only using the Libertarian Party in order to pull people away from the party and help Republicans. That's what he does. And he is out there spending money that he's gotten from donations for Republicans and trying to convince libertarians to start just posting his views and his messages.
Some of which is Coke
as
money.
Libertarian. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like we see this all the time, and it's like we try to call it out, but nobody wants to hear it because they get caught up in the divisive, bombastic messaging that comes out just because it's like, the wrong person said the wrong thing about the wrong person. Nick Sarwark said, hey, we shouldn't be platforming bigots, and, the people who have been doing that shouldn't do it. And Tom Woods, you've been doing that. And that led to this whole thing. That's why there was a whole MC to begin with, because of that one, incident. So
Right.
it's just frustrating, to see the stuff that I've worked for 30 years just being thrown down the toilet because somebody wants to have themselves be the big fish in the very little pond, and they're not worried about trying to make the pond bigger or turning it into a lake.
Yeah, well, what really did it for me, like what pushed me to join was, I felt like the party had issues with inconsistent messaging or very how should I say this? Like very watered down, safe messaging as if they were afraid to be controversial. What really pushed me, what was really, or the final straw with me was COVID. Like when, we were in a position where you had to, every fucking morning, you had to listen to your governor to find out if you were allowed to go and visit your dying loved one that day, or if you were allowed to go to work, if you could go grocery shopping, if you could fucking go to the beach or go walking in the park. And the Libertarian Party, I kept waiting for them to take, at least a stance on it, and they wouldn't. They were tweeting about, something that would have made just as much, something that might have been relevant 3 years ago, but it was like they were waiting to see how bad COVID actually was before taking a position on it because they were so afraid of, saying something controversial. So that's
but that's the thing is the Libertarian Party did come out and say, hey, this is, we shouldn't have government mandates. We shouldn't have the government telling us what to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was out there. It's just that there was a lot of noise at the time, and the people who were trying to find a way to knock the Libertarian Party just started telling people that they never did any messaging. And it's like they did do messaging. It was there. I've seen it. I'm going by what I'm saying before I even had, I didn't have a dog in this fight before, right.
At that point.
No, I know. I'm just saying it's like,
or even the party.
Right. But
I'm just saying
there was a lot of messaging out there from the Mises caucus saying, hey, they aren't saying anything. And they were literally lying about this stuff to people and getting them convinced that the Libertarian Party was okay with this. And it's like, no, they weren't. They were saying that they weren't, but nobody was paying attention to it. And then Joe Jorgensen says something about we should be anti-racist. And, you can't say that. That's apparently a wrong, bad thing. And it's funny because the MC is trying to tell people.
I know. It's not the statement itself was bad. That's okay, yeah, obviously. It's just it came across as pandering to.
No, but that's the thing, though, is that you have people who are adjacent to them who are they say we shouldn't be talking about social issues. We shouldn't be doing anything with the social war, the culture war. But that's all they talk about is trans people and this and that. And it's like. They don't want people talking about it in a way they disagree with. That's what they don't want. That's where you get in. That's the whole populism thing. That was the thing that got me about Michael Heiss specifically, was he was calling about the mask mandates. And it's like, well, it's not the government mask mandate. It's the business mask mandate. It's like, he said he would go into a store that said masks are required, right? But he would go in without one and make them tell him he has to leave. I'm like, well, you're violating their rights at that point. You're violating their private property rights by ignoring what their stated rules are for entering their property, right? No, we're just doing this. I'm like, no, you are literally violating your own principles in order to do this. It's the same thing with
if they're told to leave and they
immigration.
refuse, then they are. But
no, go if it's posted that you cannot, if it's posted that you have to wear a mask and you go in anyway,
did the
you are
store
violating.
just decide they wanted people wearing masks though, or were they forced to do so? Like
it doesn't matter. It's not our call to make. It's not your call as a separate citizen on what that private property owner has decided to do. Whether they decided it because they felt that they were pressured by the government or because they thought it was a good idea. Because you don't know. It's not your call. And that was what always got me about him. And the worst thing is the immigration stance is that there's a lot of people who are supportive of closed immigration, Lou Rockwell and those people, because they are not. It's a
we know
huge
why because
violation
of Lou
of private
Rockwell.
property.
You can try others, but we know why because of Lou.
Right, but there's a whole violation of private property rights along with closed immigration that a lot of people don't understand. And Murray Rothbard even called us out before he made his complete switch over to be a right-wing populist as opposed to libertarian, was when he said that when you ask people how you can have an immigration policy that goes against the private property owner's will, and their answer was basically because sovereignty, basically saying that the United States owns all the property and we just rent it, right? If you can tell me who I can have on my property, who I can rent my property to, who I can sell my property to, who I can hire, and who I can live with and marry, all those things that government says they can do in order to regulate immigration, how do you say that you own your property? So in order to do that, you have to violate every single person's private property rights, right? And this is the group that's supposed to be completely about private property rights. And they're literally giving them up completely in order to pander to the closed immigration people like Lee Rockwell and those people.
Well, and just real quick, so because I do think that there needs to be like some space for a complete statement for Rose, so I will get one from her. But, like, second thing, like just as a bridge, and also possibly a burned bridge. I don't know. This is where it might sound like lefty. I don't fucking care though, as we established earlier. I don't care, for instance, about the private property rights of a mega corporation. If somebody, like, I don't even care if somebody, like, I'm not saying people should because YouTube is going to take me down if I seem like I'm advocating it. I'm not saying they should, but I don't care if somebody steals from Walmart. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me because these people are part of a like cabal of like mass mega corporate / media / banking / whatever interests that are all convening at the state's behest. So I don't actually care if somebody damages the property rights of Walmart because they've also participated in the damage of property rights to so many other people. So there were many such cases in that regard in terms of mega corporations following COVID guidelines, and it's like, I don't care.
Yeah, but what about Samson's Sons?
Yeah,
or
that's what
some,
I was
some small group,
sure.
owners. They still follow those rules. And a lot of them still believe that masks were a good thing in order to make their patrons feel comfortable at that time when there was a lot of unknowns and people were scared to say, hey, if you come into my property, just wear a mask. That's all we're asking, right? That's all we're saying. Come in with a mask. And if you violate that, then you're violating their property rights, even if it's a small businesses that were doing this too. It wasn't just a megacorp.
The closer you get to a smaller business or to not even a business, but like a co-op or whatever, the more sympathetic I am. I'm just saying that there are a lot of situations where these sorts of policies enable state capitalism. And especially given the fact that I firmly believe that the whole COVID thing, like the panic over it, the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, was designed to usher in something like an AI facial recognition superstate and a CBDC and all of these things that were made much easier by the biometric identification systems that got installed and things that distancing apps that track your every move, things that would be considered terrible under any other circumstances, suddenly people were okay with it because of the pretext of the virus, and all of these things like drones monitoring your activity from the sky to make sure that you weren't getting too close to somebody. Like, all those things would have been so much less accepted under any other paradigm, and then you find out that maybe they did fund the research that caused this thing to happen, and it's like, maybe there's a problem here that should be further addressed. And, like, you know, like, the whole thing to me builds up to this, like, actual conspiracy that I don't like. You know, so for me, I can understand the frustration, both on the left and the right, of a variety of these things, especially since a lot of these restrictions were actively causing small businesses to shutter. So there's
It's deliberate, in my opinion. Like, these giant corporations made out very well. Like, I guess, sorry, but the whole it's a private company bro thing just does not work when it's a company that, you know, is directly funded and subsidized by the state, that lobbies the state to get regulations passed designed specifically to benefit them while putting their competitors out of business. Like, okay, no, fuck you, Walmart. You're not suffering because someone violated your mask policy. They're not violating your private property rights when, you know, they've had their money stolen to fund you in the first place.
Yeah.
The problem was the problem was the fact that there was a lot of fear around the pandemic.
Sure. That
was warranted.
Sure.
I have several people in my family died because of it. I had my parents who were both immunocompromised and older, that they wouldn't go outside. They were afraid of getting it, because if they had gotten it, they would have died. My dad was very much COPD. He was barely hanging on. He could not afford to get it. So there was a lot of fear out there. And a lot of people were doing were just saying, hey, wear masks just to make people feel better. Whether it helped or not, it made people feel better. And it made me feel more like they could go out safely and do things. And when you had people saying, no, we're not going to do it, we're going to not wear a mask because screw you, that doesn't make your political movement seem very sane at that point. People aren't going to say, hey, yeah, we should follow these guys, because that's all they talk about is masks these days. They don't even talk about the mandates anymore. They're talking about just masks and vaccines, which is like, vaccines are great things to have. I mean, they saved millions in lives. And there's a lot of people who are trying to create like a conspiracies out of this stuff. Like, you know, the engineering of the virus, which didn't happen, to say that they did this in order to enact all of these policies. They never enacted the policies, and they didn't have to, because we freely give up that power today with our phones. Everybody already has a phone on them. They already give that power to the government anyway. They don't need to do all this stuff. It doesn't make any sense to go through all of that work in order to do it. And the lab leak thing, just to go on off a rant on that, is that when you look at the medical stuff behind it, there's no way that the lab link could have caused COVID. There's no way it could have done it because of the genetic makeup of the way COVID works and what they were working on at the time. They would have to be like an order of magnitude of decades in order to make the jumps that had to be made, when we already had near COVID type viruses out there already. And they think they've tracked back where it came from. There's a certain animal that was at the lab at the food market that was most likely to have it. I mean, the scientists are saying there's no way.
No, they aren't.
The politicians are saying, no, it comes from the lab link. The scientists are saying, no, it came from nature.
The scientists are not saying anything as a monolith. In fact, there's plenty of disagreement in the scientific community about this, and there's plenty of people who've written extensive papers and research about this specific thing. And not to mention the fact that if you talk about the wet market, it's funny that the wet market never resulted in a global pandemic before, and suddenly it did. And it's funny that the wet market was adjacent to the lab. So the best...
It wasn't adjacent to the lab. It was miles away across the river. The fact that you can get to that point, it's not going. It's not logical.
Why isn't it logical?
To be that way. Because it's not how viruses work.
It's how this one might have worked. Hody just shared a link.
No, because viruses they were working on.
The U.S. Energy Department.
I missed something important.
The U.S. Energy Department is not.
Huh?
So the U.S. Energy
I'm sure
Department.
I'm going to go to the U.S. Energy
Scientists.
Department about virology. I mean, I'm going to talk about the 90% of all of the virologists who have done studies on this and said, no, this came from
Where do you
nature.
get that statistic from?
From the multitude of research I've done on this for years.
Okay, I'm interested. As
There's
to
studies
where you
after
get that
study
90%
after study. I can throw this stuff out there if you want to see it. But
Okay.
I'm just saying, there's a group of people who are trying to make this a political thing, that it came from Wuhan lab, when it doesn't make any sense for it to have happened that way.
It makes plenty of sense if they sold the animals that were used at the lab, and that's oftentimes a thing that happens. Is like some sort of corruption will occur with materials from a lab. Like Rose is literally in that profession, and she says that it's much more credible than you're saying it is. So, like, I don't know what you're talking about, yo.
Right. I mean, I'm not a virologist. I won't pretend to be an expert on this specific thing. However, yeah, I mean, there is a very good reason for doing gain-of-function research in viruses, because this is how you test, potential therapies or, cures
Right.
for viruses in the event that there ever is, like, a super flu or a strain of, coronavirus that is super deadly. We'll have, the technology needed to create vaccines. We'll have, potential treatments already in the pipeline. So there is good reason for doing this, but it's risky because there is always that, risk that, like, if there is a, PPE fail or, like a person could get infected and then, they go home and they spread it around. Like, there's always that risk of a leak.
Right. But the problem, here's the problems, is that the genetic makeup of COVID is too far removed from what they were working with at Wuhan.
Which papers confirm that? I'm curious.
I can go look them up. There's dozens of them that are out there that they explain this. There's,
Definitely curious.
Okay.
I haven't looked into
I
this
will
in a
send
while.
it to you.
Yeah.
But but what you're seeing is that a lot of the people in the know who have done the research on it, there are even people who said that they thought it was a lab link who now are convinced it's not.
And it also went the
because
other
of
way
that.
with some people.
Well, some people, but what you find is you get a lot of. So recently there was an article that was written from Matt Taibbi, who is using a source that source is the same person who convinced everybody that Iraq had WMDs, because he's getting it from the government who are selling them this. That's one of the scientists who are working on this thing, the gain of function, got sick and had to go to the hospital. The only problem is they didn't talk to the guy. The guy says that never happened. All of his colleagues said that they were in meetings and doing things with him. Even people who weren't from China were saying the same thing, right? And I'm not going to the House Oversight Committee. Come on, Cody. Those guys have done nothing but lie for fucking 10 years.
But that doesn't mean they're lying here. That's ad hominem.
There were reports
But that's the thing, is that you're
trying
trying to use this as the source of things. You can't use it as the source of things if it's a questionable source to begin with, like that.
Well,
I mean, I'm talking.
You can
the
use
sources
it if
I have
sources aren't questionable, and everything's questionable, really.
Right, but what I'm saying is that the person who they say, it started off with the wife of somebody who worked there got sick. Then it was one of the workers got sick, and then one of the scientists got sick. And then they named the scientist, who happened to be a guy who was writing articles at the time. And the people who were working with him from other countries who were going to conferences with him say he was never sick at that time, because he was going to these conferences. He was there. He was never in the hospital. So there's nothing to back up what these people are saying other than an informant in the security, the CIA is telling them this stuff. So now we're going to believe the CIA on this. The same source that said that that Iraq had WMDs.
So, but your contention is that we're like supposed to believe that the CIA is creating the lab leak theory.
But why? Like, to what end? To start a war with China?
Because they want to have something on China.
Yeah, it's to victimize China. And look, I mean, I'm hardly a China hawk. I do think that there is a lot of fear-mongering. Well, I think the U.S. has a very love-hate relationship with China. They need them, as a trade partner, but they also do consider them a threat. I just, I don't know.
The first casualty of war is the truth.
Of course, yeah. I don't know why they'd want to create a deliberate conspiracy to make it look like China accidentally leaked, a
U.S.
virus.
funded virus too.
Because, I mean, how is that any different than claiming claiming that someone ate a bat, therefore we should not. I mean, I feel like you could make a stronger argument for why we shouldn't be trading with China if you try to claim, oh well, these people are so unclean, they eat raw bats at open air market. It's like that. I feel like that's even like, if you were trying to propagandize people against China, that would be an even stronger argument.
I've made the exact point. Like, I mean, to me, like, there are a lot of people who hate foreigners who latched onto this. They were like, them Chinese, they have nothing,
Yeah, they eat raw bats.
And so, like,
so uncivilized.
Yeah. I'm going to check these links, by the way. I opening chat is going to fuck OBS, so one moment. People can.
I haven't actually looked into it. This isn't a long time. I just remember like the most of the. There was some reason to believe that, for example, the furin cleavage site in the virus did not look like it was naturally occurring. It looked like it was spliced in, among a couple other markers that indicate, an engineered virus or a synthetically, manipulated virus, as opposed to one that would occur naturally.
So I'm gonna look at these. So we got.
At this point in time, I question anything that has to do with COVID or climate change. When it comes to hard science, I'm really questionable about the whole thing. I mean, it's just heavily politicized. It's monetized heavily. It's questionable.
Yes, politicization is a huge issue in science. I mean, it's even. I mean, because again, I work. I work in a lab that studies certain genes that are genetic mutations that are behind several types of blindness. And it is so hard to get funding, like if you don't have all the correct keywords in your grant applications, it's very political, like what gets funded and what doesn't. So
and where do all the grants come from?
That the state if you're not studying something that the state would approve of, your research is never going to even get done.
It's all funded by the state, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, and Hody quotes that saying, on average, respondents assigned a 77% probability to a zoonosis, 21% to the lab leak scenario, and 2% to the other category. And he says, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that this still leaves the lab leak on the table, especially with scientists receiving government's cash.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Every scientist will tell you it's always a possibility it could have been a lab leak because they can't rule it out. And that's how scientists work and think.
Right. This is a survey about what the leading cause, what they think is most likely.
But didn't you just say that
21% say?
I said the majority, 80%, almost 80% believe it came from nature still.
You said scientists say.
That was within 2 months ago.
You said scientists say. That implies that scientists don't not say the other thing. Or do you
No. What I'm saying is that scientists will say that will always say that it's a possibility that it could have come from the lab, just because it is a possibility.
Well, you said originally that scientists said it was not lab leak. That's what you said. That's
no, this was not likely. That was not likely. That it was like. So what you will hear from a scientist, and this is the way scientists think, is that they will not rule it out because it's not any way to say one way or the other that it has to be a certain way or the other. But they're saying the evidence that they're presented with, they believe it came from natural causes, a genetic mutation, which happens all the time. We have bird flus, we have the original COVID, thing from, the Spanish flu. I mean, that was
whatever is most likely is probably the right answer.
And
I'm ruling out that it was natural, that this occurred naturally, but I think the lab leak is more plausible. And how much are the folks paying you, by the way?
Yeah, right.
Oh, I wish I was paying you.
No, I mean, money. You talk about what happens all the time. And do lead scientists jumping off of roofs? Does that happen all the time when this kind of leak happens? Do the first employees the first people who actually got COVID being the lab workers. Does that happen all the time?
There's no evidence of that. I'm telling you, the people who they say were the first ones to get it aren't the ones who got it. They were never sick. When you go and look at, they have to do antibody tests every 6 months at that place, and they've never found anybody who had any kind of sign of COVID from Wuhan.
So,
I mean, this is just an info debate. At this point, like, we've kind of gone off track of what we're talking
here's my
about.
problem
But, like,
with
I'll
all
keep
of this.
sending it to you. But
I've looked at all of this. Trust me. I've looked at Tybie's, what he said, and where it comes from, and all of that stuff. The problem is that libertarians are very susceptible to falling into conspiracy-minded stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that most of the time, it's going to be incompetence that got us there. I mean, how many libertarians were caught up in the whole 9/11 was an inside job thing?
And I could go on for hours about how that's true.
I'm fairly agnostic on the subject. Like, I think it's plausible that, yeah, it was a bad case of blowback for U.S. foreign policy, but there is, like, I mean,
you realize, like, less than 10 years earlier, there was an attack on the World Trade Center, right? From the same people.
So what? It's well within. It is the type of thing the U.S. government would do as a false flag. They have done similar.
For what reason, though? But that's what was the reason they would have done that?
Heroin.
Killed those people.
Yeah, like,
tell me.
Literally, like he just did. And see, okay, first off, if conspiracy mindedness is bad, the thing that you should do is interface with the ideas. And I've noticed that multiple times when Rose has tried to, like, construct a thought on this subject, you have cut her off. Like, you could let her finish her statement.
That's a problem on my end, whereas I like to talk a lot, and I talk
I do
over
it too.
people sometimes. What I'm saying is what benefit did the United States get in killing thousands of its citizens on 9/11?
They don't care about their citizens. They would happily kill.
What benefit did they get? Why did they do it?
If it meant that they could start all these wars.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem with that. There was already 70% support to go into Iraq before 9/11.
And a rally around the flag event is never done.
Afghanistan.
Okay, how likely would the
They were
Patriot Act
Afghanistan too.
People still had, like, the idea of, like, the Fed snooping through your browser history, or, you're listening to your phone without a warrant, like that. People still took issue with that sort of thing. Then, some people hijack planes and find them in the buildings, and suddenly everyone's perfectly fine, just sacrificing any semblance of privacy. I remember having this. I was a teenager at the time. I had this argument with my parents. They're like, "Oh, this is just temporary." I'm like, okay, this is not going to be temporary. Once they have power, they do not relinquish it. And also, this is eventually going to be turned against you. Hey, I was right. I've never been wrong about anything political.
Anyway. They didn't need to do that. They just did it anyway.
But okay, I hate that argument.
Hold on.
This idea that, they were doing it anyway. Okay, yeah, of course they were. However, they have to keep it on the down low. They have to do it. They can't do it on nearly the scale. For example, if the state is kind of secretly doing something that's technically unconstitutional, they have to kind of do it on a smaller scale. They can't let it come to light. They have to, not draw attention to it. Once they have a law in place saying that they can do something, though, then, yeah, that all goes out the window. They can do it on a much larger scale.
What I'm saying is,
I had this argument about,
the only reason we knew about it,
charging them with seditious conspiracy. Like, they're like, the state has, arrested people for political reasons before. Okay, but once there's a law in the books saying that, someone who's thought to be a political extremist can be, detained indefinitely, even if they're a U.S. citizen and they haven't been charged with a crime, you're going to see a lot more people rounded up. Whereas before, they used to have to kind of quietly go in and disappear them during the night and then rendition them somewhere. And this was not, heavily talked about, so you didn't hear about it. Once they have, a law saying they can do that, though, it's going to happen a lot more frequently.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, a lot more funding, because you've got a lot more emotionalism behind, like, these sorts of things. A lot more people, like, recruitment skyrocketed after that.
Yep.
And so did a bunch of, like, military industrial stocks. So did a bunch of, like, intelligence industrial stocks. You got, like plants like, Peter Thiel, like, absolutely ruling the game with things like Palantir. You got the things that Edward Snowden would eventually leak were the things that were architected based on these sorts of this conflict that spurred from those things. What people on the conspiratorial end of this do is cui bono, and they also do auto ab chao analysis. They also do problem reaction solution model analysis, which makes perfect sense. If you're trying to manage an empire, engineering a manufactured solution to a problem that you can also manufacture, that improves your position or profit or whatever, makes perfect sense. And then you start to look at the things surrounding it that make absolutely no sense. The fact that they won't release the NIST data, the fact that they had a compromised commission report that was done under oath, secret, all this stuff, and not on the record, not under oath, and all this stuff combines with the fact that you can see things that could be perceived as charge explosions, and you can also see World Trade Center 7 going down without anything hitting it in a pseudo freefall pattern. There's enough there.
Plane was delayed 30 minutes. The plane that was supposed to hit it was delayed, but it still fell.
Yeah, and there's enough there, so much in the enough there category, that simply dismissing people who support it as wrong conspiracy theorists is a way to lose at the messaging level too.
Well, here's you mentioned World Trade Center 7 and near free fall. Here's the problem.
Debris hit it, we know.
There was one video from the back that looks like it could have done that way, but when you see the video from the front, you see it collapsing exactly like it was modeled to have collapsed if it was caught on fire and the infrastructure was compromised.
According to
exactly
who?
What happened.
And
video.
And why can't we see the models?
Who says you can't see the models? I can go out there and see. I've seen all sorts of models from Purdue and NIST and everything else.
Okay, but the original models that they were literally reticent to release, the things that they said that they wouldn't release, those were not released because they compromised or jeopardized public safety.
Mm-hmm.
And so
they were afraid.
Go.
I could see what they were getting at. They were afraid that somebody could take that information and try to use it on other buildings and things. It eventually was released, and it's out there to see.
Okay.
A lot of this stuff has been, over the years, thoroughly debunked. But you're not going to hear about
I'm open
that.
to the idea that it was just blowback and that it was just really convenient for the ruling class, or that they had. And they had been tipped off. They had evidence it was going to happen, but they allowed it to happen because, again, it was useful. And again, they don't give two shits about their citizens if they happily sacrifice thousands of them for their agenda. I'm just saying,
it was just pure incompetence on a government.
But
a government was incompetent in doing anything about it.
Again, though,
I think is the
I'm
more
not
realistic. I just have a problem thinking that this government is that intelligent and capable
I've heard this argument
to
too,
do all this stuff.
All these super competent.
Yeah.
No, you only need a couple departments, that manage.
You would need tens of thousands of people to be in on this. How would you plant all the They say it was controlled demolition.
Maybe you wouldn't just have someone reach out and act as a terrorist recruiter and convince, some, vulnerable young people who have seen U.S. atrocities overseas to martyr themselves.
FBI does that all the time.
That's how you reach out.
Or the people who have been doing it and they tried to attack.
Provide them with, weapons and then convince them to go shoot up a convenient or a grocery store.
They did it with Mujahideen and Operation Cyclone. They did it with the Ukrainian nationalists and, aerodynamic. They did it with actual German Nazis before, during, and after World War II. They did it with so many people. They wouldn't do it here again?
No, it just doesn't make the sense, though. Is what I'm saying is that you already had a group of people who were attacking the World Trade Center just a few years before. They tried to blow it up with bombs in rental trucks at the base of the WTC in '93. That was their goal, was to take down the World Trade Center, and it had been their goal for years. Why, maybe the government looked the other way when they heard about it, but they weren't obviously in on it. They weren't the ones planning it. That was all being planned years ago.
Well, that's not obvious
we
to
know
me.
they
It
had
looks
sex
nice when they
connections, too.
coordinated
I
it
mean,
to run a
sex
test
didn't
run to
prove
see
that
what
guy.
public opinion was going to be.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But the thing, that's what I'm saying. Bush won on the fact that he said he was going to go into Iraq and then finish what his dad didn't finish. He won the election off of that. There was 77% to 80% support from the American people to go into Iraq and finish the job.
Yeah, and where was the motive to go to Afghanistan in that?
I don't think anybody really wanted to go to Afghanistan. That was just a precursor
the
for
World
going
Trade
to
Center
Iraq.
sure shit gave us a great reason to go in there and corner up the heroin market, which was
Yeah.
really starting to bang from the late 90s here, wasn't it?
Yeah, especially
Yep.
since right before 9/11, the U.S. government gave the literal Taliban $53 million.
Uh-huh.
I think maybe the best
I don't
way
know,
to
man.
unify us all on this one is to kind of say, okay, the government is either extremely incompetent or has a lot of convenient
And
accidents,
we need to call out shills.
and that's not fair.
A shill?
Like-
Is that what we're calling me a shill now?
No.
Because I don't believe the same way you guys believe?
No, she was joking, yo. That was
Okay.
We make jokes like that on this show sometimes.
We call it, we call each other feds all the time.
Anyway.
I think that the unifier here is they either have really convenient accidents or they're very incompetent or, they're in on it or something, but they're not transparent about it. At the very minimum, I think it's concerning. I know you were kind of dismissing the oversight committee being like, yeah, they just threw away all their evidence and we had nothing to investigate. But I think that that's telling, right? Like to say that, like, okay, either the oversight committee is lying, which, as you've noted, they've been prone to doing before by being the ones who don't decide not to look into the evidence, or also by being like, I think that there's a very real possibility that they were telling the truth. Now, we can believe them or we cannot, but either way, but this is government investigating government. And we're deciding which branch sucks. They're both bad. Like this.
Well, that's why I'm not believing governments. I'm believing what the scientists are trying to say.
Sure.
That's what I'm saying.
Percent of them
I agree.
say our thing. 77% of them say your thing is the most likely thing. Let's agree that the scientists probably know more than us. And so if 21% of them say, yeah, this is pretty likely, or this is the most likely, and another 77%, this is most likely, fine. I'll leave both of those on the table. The point is that they're not good at it, and it's probably better to, why we decided to have this conversation in the first place. Like, we need to, well, that's what it's become. But at this point, like, what we were trying to set out to do was talk about, like, how we can like offer real stateless solutions to these problems. And I think that should be a point of unification on this issue, because we offer a much better
problem is the
solution.
state.
Right. The problem is the state. Like,
Yeah, even in my view of 9/11, we pissed off enough people that they were willing to do that. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
We're involved in areas we should have been involved in, and we got enough people pissed off that they were willing to do those things.
Yes.
And that's, in my opinion, the real problem, the one we should be focusing on. And that's why I sometimes think that takes what we're saying. Some of the stuff takes away from looking at. That's where we really should be looking at, is saying, why are we doing these things that end up causing blowback on us like this when we really don't need to, and we shouldn't be involved there.
Well, and just to be like, as an olive branch, and also an olive branch to the conspiracy side that might tie this together, at the very dead level, like, best case of this scenario, it has been proven through declassified documents and a bunch of other shit that the U.S. government funded the Mujahideen through Operation Cyclone. Zbigniew Brzezinski down there pointing them at Russians, say, sick 'em. And then, like, Jimmy Carter being like, the nice friendly face. I don't have a clammy palm at all. Let me shake your hand. This guy, like, comes in and he acts as the face for this, like, this operation. And Operation Cyclone itself then creates the fertile groundwork for the organizations that would become Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, ISIS, ISIL, and the Taliban. And so all of these organizations are the result of those splinters, and so are basically every other like major like Islamic terror organization. It's all the result of
if
the
you
CIA backing those
Stalinism is bad.
over the
kids.
years.
if you look at what happened, what's going on in Iran and what happened to Iran and the revolutionary takeover there, it's all because we were backing the bad guy who, when he gets deposed, we end up taking in.
Yeah.
Right. If we hadn't taken him in, we probably wouldn't have had our embassy taken over. That government, if we hadn't been backing him committing horrible atrocities in Iran, and the Shah, backing him to do that, then the religious, side of things wouldn't have risen up and been able to overthrow him. If it had been a more democratically elected, person who may or may not have been our friend. That was the whole thing. We wanted them to be our friends, so we put somebody in there that was kind to us. That caused that whole situation, which has snowballed into all the other things that are going on.
Right.
You trace this back to the end of World War One.
Directly do it. They're responsible. I mean, it was their foreign policy that led to the situation that killed all those people. So they still are morally culpable.
And like even directly, because their patsy was Osama bin Laden, and another name for Osama bin Laden is Tim Osman. And another name, like, for Osama bin Laden is Tim Osman. And this was the name that he went by when he was a U.S. asset of the CIA, and they were directly funding his camp in Khost. And so, like, then they said, well, it must be Osama bin Laden. They had no evidence of that. Never. But they said it was, and that was their precursor for going into Afghanistan. And that's one of the reasons that the conspiracists say that it's, a possibility that they use this as a catalyst for much broader intervention in the Middle East, including what Scott Horton would later call the Fool's Errand, and write that book about. And so the reason that I'm saying all this is because, like, that combined with the fact that, like, at the, like, most surface level, like, lack of conspiracy, analysis of the situation. The CIA funded the people who they would eventually say did it, and then the FBI literally let it happen. There's a whole like series of articles and exposés on the fact that like these people were the people who allegedly did it were allowed through, and the like literal FBI was courting them in a variety of ways. And so like this was on Newsweek. This isn't Alex Jones shit. And so when I'm talking about this, like the best case scenario is that the U.S. let it happen and then use their CIA-funded patsies as an excuse to broaden their political powers. That's like, and they had to like the best case scenario is that they had to save face somehow for years and years of like catastrophes caused by these people, and like government overreach and the highway of death, and the Al-Shifa pharmaceutical factory bombing, and a variety of other like US-led massacres that killed tens of thousands of people often at a time, and the Western-backed, of course, state of Israel, and all of these things that like drove agitation in the Middle East and drove a lot of people domestically to say we shouldn't be doing this here, why don't we give peace a chance? And then at the dead level best, they let this happen with people that they had already sort of groomed into this so that they could like use the engineered crisis to like garner more power, because that's like on the record. The FBI, the official story is now, and this is the official story, is now that the FBI basically let these people slip through their fingers on purpose because or at the very least were very, very incompetent at stopping them before they knew what was going to happened, because they knew it every step of the way. Like the very surfacey levelist analysis of this that doesn't even say that it was an explosion job, or that any of the things that like drive people's suspicions about it are true. The fact of the matter is that like you get down to brass tacks, the CIA funded the people. the U.S. government blamed the CIA-funded people with suspiciously, like, unburnt passports. And then they talked about bin Laden with no actual connection. They got massive wars in not only Afghanistan, but a variety of African countries and a variety of other places in the Middle East other than Iraq. They got a bunch of stuff domestically in terms of expansion of power and overreach and shit. And so even if, like, the buildings did collapse because of planes, which I still doubt, I am not convinced otherwise, then, like, the general thing here is that at the very dead level best, this is still the U.S.'s fault directly. It is still an inside job either way.
Yeah, I agree with that. But you know what would have prevented it, though? Clearly, these people just didn't have enough funding. Okay, they couldn't do their jobs because they didn't have enough money.
Just a little bit more funding. We can
Yeah.
we can give the FBI.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's.
And they need more powers too. You know, they need to be able to see into, you know, our houses so that, you know, see. How else are they going to know if we're plotting terrorist attacks?
Yeah, I need.
They're not watching. It's only if we say certain keywords.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
That
The algorithm is watching you.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
I was just saying the algorithm is what watches this. It's not people.
Yeah.
Algorithms are sitting there watching you, listening to everything you say and type and all that shit. And whenever you say the right words or whatever, it throws a flag and hands it to an analyst somewhere who then looks at your conversation. I really firmly believe that this is how it runs, and I don't think that there's anything that goes on that's not monitored.
And also, like, the 3 hops policy that Edward Snowden talked about. That means, hey, fun fact.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch this because I'm connected to you guys.
Yeah,
so,
like that.
Probably.
That's
or you're on the watch list because you're connected to me. I'm pretty sure I'm boring, but.
Well, that's the thing. We're all, like, less than 3 hops away from somebody that they could surveil because of this policy. Like, it literally dragnets the world. That's the reason it's. And then, like, you know. Fucking, here's the other half of it, and this is the shit that really riles up the conspiracy theorists, and you can ask me because I'm a conspiracy theorist. This is the shit that really riles up the conspiracy theorists, because then you have Obama assassinate 2 American citizens with a drone, and then joke about it in front of the, like, Correspondents' Dinner or the Grammy. I don't fucking care. It was something like that. I think it was the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where he directly threatened the Jonas Brothers, and everybody was like, ha 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 ha, you just joked about your extrajudicial illegal assassination, ha ha ha. And, like,
a fucking, like, teenager for being related to a guy who made hateful YouTube videos, who was a U.S. citizen. Oh, and a little girl. There was a little girl who was like 6 or 7 who was, I think, the sister of people killed, who was also killed in one of those drone strikes.
Well, no, that was even worse, because that was a Trump raid, and Trump literally like ordered a raid on a compound. Like, everybody, Trump didn't do any war. He's a peace fuck you. Trump was not a peace candidate, you piece of shit. Trump
he
left her.
Start new wars. That's a very low bar.
Yeah,
that's a very low bar.
And
he continued all of Obama and Bush's and every other administration policies.
And one could argue that emboldening dictators starts wars. And one would have to argue that emboldening dictators starts wars if we just agreed to the shit that I just said about the FBI and CIA and their shit. So it's like, if you actually look at the deep state, Trump is a very strong asset for them. But, like, he left her bleeding out on the floor. She got a bullet in the back of her neck, and she just...
God.
Little girl, finish off that Al-Awlaki family, tie up the loose ends. You can't have her coming back with blowback. People like little girls as, like, symbols of shit. Otherwise,
and
they would...
These people will lose no sleep over it, too. Like, they're
And it's like people like little girls as tools of propaganda. That's how the Naira al-Sabah testimony worked. Oh, they took the babies out of incubators.
Oh, God.
And then you find out later that she's actually lying and is the daughter of the people who run the joint. It's like, that makes so much more sense now.
I mean, when you're on a mission, you don't just detour through hospitals to pull babies out of incubators just because you're just evil like that.
Sort of like there's no burned babies that I can tell, And the one that you can see in these social media posts, hey, that turned out to be an AI manipulated image, and the original image was like a dog at the vet.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow. How would you? I don't even know how you'd manipulate a dog at the vet to look like.
You take the AI image, and I hate AI. I'm going to go off on this with Hody someday, but I hate AI with a fiery passion. And you take the image of the dog on the blanket at the vet, and you say, AI, make this dog look burned. And the AI does that, and you can see all the distortions of it. And then they said, hey, this was a baby, and nobody can tell because it's burned remains. And so they all just assumed it was correct. Hasbara, propaganda, as Scott Horton would say.
Going back to the conspiracy theory thing, though, because I will say, like, at one point it was mentioned, libertarian people who are drawn to libertarian philosophy are often conspiracy minded because they're the natural contrarian types, and like that is true. Like some of this stuff, there is either true or plausible. I have seen some people in libertarian circles go down some rather bizarre rabbit holes. Like, I mean, most obvious being like flat Earth, which that's a deliberate psyop.
Yeah.
But, or things like,
Or
like
things
genocide or shit about the Jews or something.
Or, hey, all trans people are groomers. That's a very popular conspiracy bullshit from bigot, fascist little ghouls.
I think one of the reasons a lot of libertarians are drawn to conspiracy theory is because we also have learned a whole lot about conspiracy fact.
Uh-huh.
And we have spoken about the FBI. We've spoken about the CIA. So let's talk about the NSA.
Yeah.
So there was an author, James Bamford. He wrote about the NSA. The book is called The Puzzle Palace. And one of my favorite takeaways from that book, the way that I illustrate how these people think, how they work, how they operate. Congress actually caught them listening in on American domestic calls. Congress told them, you can't do this anymore. This was back in the 70s. They promised Congress in a congressional commission, raised hands, Boy Scout look on their faces. We will not do this anymore. We promise. We'll be good boys now. They immediately, right after the commission ended, spoke to their counterparts in GCHQ, which is the British version of the NSA, and said, we know you're making these tapes. We want to borrow them because Congress didn't say we couldn't.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then, we've got this recent shit with the extension of FISA warrantless bullshit.
Uh-huh. Was it ever any doubt?
Yeah.
So conspiracy theory comes to us far too easily because we've seen conspiracy fact firsthand.
That's right.
Well,
and that's
the same missions were the ones where they admitted to manipulating the news too, and then they swore they're we just won't manipulate the news anymore either. Which obviously they still do. I mean, this is fucking retarded to even think that they don't.
Well, and especially since
they're not independent.
Especially since another anti-AI point that I have to make, the literal government through SOCOM is seeking AI to use for digital deception campaigns, digital disinformation. And what they want to do is they want to use your Internet of Things devices to listen in on your conversation, gauge your sentiment, see what you'll believe, and then deploy a specific kind of lie that will help them in their regimes. And all their lies will be sourced from the government, which will be backed by the fact checkers. So basically their digital deception campaigns are designed to rig the fact checkers against truth.
Uh-huh.
Dead internet already happening.
Yes, and so AI is actively being used to control reality and destroy truth. AI is part of the Antichrist, if there is any.
Remember
My
we were
problem
told
with AI?
used to sell us shit, just like most data gathering. Worst that happens, you get some ads. Okay, but who are these data mining companies selling that to? Of course, that just gets you called a conspiracy theorist. Oh, the government's not going to watch you, listening on you.
Yeah, the problem I have is that there are conspiracies that have happened. There's conspiracies that are out there. There's conspiracies going on right now, and I think if We just need to be critical of our own willingness to buy into some of those, because you can get caught up into a point where nobody will listen to you anymore.
Right, and then you can,
If
well, like I
you're
said,
on
a
everything.
flat earther.
like-
that was
like-
a deliberate discrediting attempt.
Yeah, like MTG is out there talking about space, Jewish space lasers and HARP and all that sort of thing. And it's like when you start going down some of these paths, you are going to get ignored because people will label you as a kook. So when we can prove these things, great, let's get out there and prove them. But when we can't, we kind of have to, in my opinion, we have to look at the critical thinking side of things. And then maybe, if we're not sure, it could be one way or the other. Let's be careful about that, because we don't want to do that. We don't want to get ourselves to a point where we're just seen as the new John Birch Society and engaging in all of these things.
Yeah,
because we will just be pushed to the side, ignored.
Well, and
100%.
Here's the other half of that, though. Just to be clear, it's unfortunate that Marjorie Taylor Greene won't shut her fuckhole, because like ultimately, when you end up with like Jewish space lasers, it really distracts from the fact that they have space lasers and they're just not Jewish ones. Like, the Jews don't control everything, and that makes it worse. In fact, they're probably the opposite of Jewish space lasers, because NASA is a Nazi organization. So go fuck yourself, Marjorie. You're making it worse.
This is a deliberate.
Yeah, but now whenever they use the lasers, they can blame the Jews.
Yeah. That's an actual tactic, though. Like, you plant, like, there'll be something that's actually happening. So then you start a conspiracy theory, but you make it look, completely ridiculous. Like, recently, actually, I've started seeing, comments in non-political groups about the Federal Reserve, but it's being, like, I've seen it with, like, 3 quotation marks around it, meant to make it look like a Jewish conspiracy. Yeah, like it's all, the Jews doing something. Meant to plant the idea that any talk about the Federal Reserve is anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. So, like, I'm like, yeah, you're not fooling anyone with trying to plant the idea that this is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Because you rarely, in recent years even hear people talking about the Federal Reserve. I mean, Ron Paul kind of popularized it at one point, but that was like 20 years ago at this point.
And the worst part is that, like, the Federal Reserve is worse than ever. We got CBDC coming up. Fuck CBDC.
I feel like more people are starting to, even if they don't understand, the mechanism, like they realize there is something very wrong with the monetary system, that it's highly unstable and it's unsustainable. Yeah. And I think more people are becoming interested in, learning why. So, I mean, I'm just saying, if I were running the show, I would be, trying to plant the idea that anyone who speaks out against the central bank is, just some crazy, bigoted conspiracy kook.
And it's been like that for a bit. Like, I literally get called, and it's years ago, I got called a fucking Nazi by a group of people in libertarian circles who were very friendly with neocons, and literal neocons who called themselves that, not just even labeling them that. They were very friendly with these neocons and these, like, establishmentarians, and one of them was a technocrat, and, like, these people, like, actually had a marginal amount of sway in certain circles, because the Libertarian Party begs for scraps and then holds on to them. And so do libertarian circles, and oftentimes that means that, like, you get these people who aren't actually serious about supporting liberty, and they literally did that. I used the term Jewish lobby in the same way that Israel, the Israeli government, and the people affiliated with them, AIPAC, will call themselves the Jewish lobby. I didn't say anything bad. I said it existed.
Yeah.
Things become suddenly offensive when someone wants it to be offensive.
I gotta take off. I really appreciate this conversation. You guys having me on again. I know you like closing thoughts, so I'm just gonna give you a couple.
As long as you need.
We talk about being better, and how can libertarians prove that they be better? And a lot of it's walking the talk. Just don't talk about how we would feed the people, just feed the people. Jesus didn't, it's there in the Bible. It's hard to believe. It says Jesus didn't speak scripture. He just fed people. He just washed feet. He just served. And that is, I like logic. I was converted to liberty because of logic. So I'm not saying forget that. I'm saying leave that hat on and let's put on some gloves as well. let's put on so keep the philosophy. That's great. But I mean, a lot of studies show that if you are going to be swayed by logic arguments, you're a libertarian already. It's done. It's happened. If you're going to be swayed by something else, like most of the world, then it's going to require seeing liberty in action. And that requires seeing us care about each other. And a lot of that, guys, a lot of this seems like, man, I've already got so much to do. I don't know if I can donate my time. I don't know if I can donate whatever. Showing people you care about them can be as simple as calling your grandma and seeing how she's doing, or posting somebody, like seeing somebody struggling on Facebook or social media and just being like, hey, can we talk? Like, I feel like you and I like should connect. Showing somebody you care about them does not have to be a massive investment. To people who are lonely and struggling with isolation, a simple message of, hey, I just wanted to reach out to you to see how you're doing. Scroll your friends list, see who you haven't like gotten in touch with for a while. We talk about how bad the algorithm sucks. People that are suffering in loneliness, the algorithm is not nice to those people. Go through your friends list and see some people who are posting things that have no likes and no follows and no shares and no interactions, and see how they're doing and give them something and just create some connections. It can be really easy to show how much you care about people, and they will inherently, if you just be like, this is, you know, and this is something Reinhold taught me that I think is fantastic. Make libertarians stop being just a set of policy values and have it be a mentality, and have part of that mentality be how much you care about somebody, because that's what's going to convert people to liberty, is seeing how much different you are than everybody else. We're going to disagree about policy stuff because libertarians could do that all day till we're blue in the face. What matters most is that you say, I am following love and care and respect and for all my individual people, and I'm going to embrace a philosophy that does that. But it's less about the philosophy and more about the practice, about the actual actions of doing these things. To end on this most recent subject, what's one of the best things libertarians can do? Be transparent. We talk about, oh, did the government do it? Did they do it? Did they do it? Didn't they do it? Well, part of the problem is they lie about everything and they're not transparent about anything. They've deleted evidence in all of this stuff. They hide everything they're doing. So maybe one of the best things we can do as libertarian organizations, especially if you're the LP or an officer, or if you have a local community or something, be incredibly transparent. Be way too transparent. Show bank accounts, show statements, be the one offering, be the one who's like, no, I'm eager for this transparency. Imagine if American sports, baseball, the athletes were eager to show you the results of their urine tests. Right? What happens every time somebody makes a big tackle and they get busted on a steroid thing? They're like, uh-oh. Oh, I'm scared about how this is going to go. Of course I got busted. The day after my big play, they're getting me a steroid test. Oh, no. No, show them the urine test. Give them all the pee. Pee on everybody. Let everybody have all your But like, and I'm just making a joke here, but really, like, that's what people want to see.
Kelly.
Is that if I have to drag you kicking and screaming towards transparency or towards loving your neighbor, no way am I going to trust you to rule my life. Absolutely no way am I going to give you any credence at all. I'm lonely enough. I don't need somebody getting involved in my life only to stab me in the back afterwards because they were just trying to score some political points. Mm-hmm. What I want is somebody who actually cares. Somebody who's the transparency, the push for transparency doesn't come from other people being like, I don't think that's transparent enough. It comes from themselves and say, I want to be more transparent with you. I want to be more connected with you. And that's driven at a personal, internal level. There's really no substitute for it. I can't tell you what this looks like because people's consciences are shaped differently by God. And that is good. That is important, that we all are gifted at different things. Maybe you want to connect with somebody lonely. Maybe you want to connect with somebody who's angry. Maybe you want to connect with somebody who's hungry or somebody who's in prison. There's so many different outlets, and I can't tell you which one is going to be the most you. Only you can tell you who's going to be the most you. And for me, this is how libertarian wins. 1 is action, and 2 is just being genuine about it. And those are the real big sellers for me. To me, this is how liberty is going to win, if it's going to win at all. I hate to even make it sound like win, because that makes it sound like it's a tactic. Because in reality, I don't want this to be a tactic. Jesus Christ was so cool with doing his ministry and getting killed for it, for his efforts. I want the kind of liberty that is so radically compassionate that if we lose, we're happy about it because we got to live free and die free. And that's the kind of liberty that I think other people are aching for in their lives, and we do it best by walking the talk.
And also, Hody, before you book, just like this ties in beautifully to so many like libertarian principles, because like we're supposed to be against the war on drugs. Well, that I think my internet fucked up for a second. We're supposed to be against the war on drugs, but like, you know, you just want people to get high. You don't care. You're a degenerate. All this stuff, and it's like, no. In fact, the prohibition has never worked. The point is that we're supposed to prove that the government is not an effective manager of positive social change. And one of the ways that you can really tell that is that prohibition has always caused more knock-on effects in terms of problems than it has ever caused solutions. And one of the reasons for that is, and it touches on what you're saying, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is community. And if you're not going to give people a better world, they're never going to try and stop escaping it. And so, like, the thing that we need to worry about here is the same thing as that. Rat Park proved that. And, like, so did so many other associated experiments that proved the exact same fucking shit.
Yep.
So, if you want people to stop their maladaptive habits in terms of drugs, in terms of, you know, like, a lifestyle that you don't agree with, you know, something that they're doing that you think is toxic to them or whatever, don't just say, "You're bad! You hang, tar and feather." Just give them a better alternative. Or stop being a cunt.
Bingo. Thanks so much, guys.
Be well.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Yeah, and on that too, I mean,
go ahead.
you also have to make sure you do things right when we do implement these things, because what we saw in Oregon, where they did get rid of prohibition. They said drugs are free, and now they're going back on it because it wasn't implemented the best way, right? And that's where you get into it. That if you do implement, you'd implement in a way that doesn't succeed, you're getting a backlash now that's going to be even harder to get to that thought process later on, right? So, I mean, the only good thing about there is that they are keeping at least marijuana legal, so that's going to be great. And they're just focusing on the harder stuff, but that's a step backwards, right? So,
they stopped arresting people. I mean, it's not legal. It's just like they're not arresting people for possession, though, right?
But no, they're going back to it now. They're implementing a law to say now for harder drugs, fentanyl, cocaine, etc., that they are going to start arresting people again and that sort of thing. So that's where the unfortunate thing has happened there, right? So that's why I always caution, you know, there's a lot of libertarians will get in there and say, okay, day one, we're going to get rid of all of these agencies. We're going to do all of this stuff and get rid of all this stuff. And you're going to end up with a bigger backlash if you do it the wrong way. And you have to be careful.
Well, the problem was that, like, they decriminalized drugs, or at least they stopped enforcing, you know, prohibition laws. But there's still like for example, a lot of these major cities have some of the worst gun laws in the country. They also have, there are countries where it's very hard to defend yourself because, like, the type of place like where, I don't know, someone tries to rob your convenience store and, like, you do anything to, like, fight back or stop them, you'll be arrested. So it's led to some unfair discrediting of libertarian ideas, where in the libertarian society, sure, you can, if you want to shoot heroin, go ahead. If you try to rob, you know, someone's house or someone's convenience store to fund your habit, though, yeah, I mean,
well,
what happens to you when you try to break into someone's property to steal from them is your own doing. Like, you can't, like, decriminalize, you know, drugs, but then also criminalize self-defense or defense of property.
Well,
that's what I was getting.
And you can't decriminalize drugs without having policies or programs in place to help the people who are dependent upon those drugs, who are, you know, in a bad space, have mental health issues. We need to be able to help them. Those need to be there in place before you start taking the decriminalization away, because then you end up abandoning all these people. It's like we were spending all this money on mental health institutions in the late 70s or the 80s.
here in Indianapolis, we had a place called Central State. It was being funded by the government that was helping people who were having really mental problems to have somewhere to go and seek help. And then when, Reagan came in and they kind of got rid of all of that and said, we're not going to fund this stuff anymore.
Yeah,
but they didn't have anything alternatively to help them. These people went out in the society, ended up screwing up things and doing things, getting in trouble, causing problems with drugs, increasing the need for the drug war to increase. That's how it all, and increased homelessness as well, which was another thing that the government wanted to come and try to fix later. So that's where we have to really be focused on getting those programs in place to help the people who need the help, so that we can do these things in a way that's not going to just, make people scared of the solutions in society.
Communism
better because of it.
Helicopters.
And the other thing too is I hear a lot of people yelling,
like drug treatment than bombs. I feel like the issues that are driving people to, drug addiction run so much deeper than just lack of access to mental health care. A lot of it goes back to the hopelessness that come from living in a hyperinflationary corporate hellscape where you have, little chance of ever owning anything or having a job that you find fulfilling, no ability to start a family because you can't even afford to, live on your own, let alone, pay for anyone else. So again, it's a lot.
The argument I have right now
Community
too,
is better than anything.
I have a real problem now with a lot of libertarians who are very much anti-communist, anti-socialist. And I'm not a communist or socialist. I very much a capitalist. But when you have an oligarchy in place and not a free market capitalist society, but you pretend that it is, then people will assign all of the ills and everything that are happening because of that to that, and they will search out for alternative solutions. The only reason people are looking towards communism or socialism as a means to implement is because they're so thoroughly having a problem with what we have now, the systems we have now, and they don't know that it's not the same thing. We need to fix what we have now, and nobody wants to do that. We want to talk about fixing the problems we have today in the economy because they're afraid that the idea of socialism is going to sneak in and be part of it, part of the solution. And so they're just like reflexively defensive against an oligarchy at that point.
Most people don't realize, a lot of people don't know what socialism actually is. I mean, I moderate a libertarian versus 100%. Communist debate group on Facebook. So, most of the arguments are ridiculous. Not all, though. Most of the consistent communists, most of their grievances are completely valid. Issue is their idea of what exactly is causing societal ills is off, so then the solutions they propose are incorrect. Their class analysis is based on a very faulty idea.
And hey, if any of you need somebody in this call to call a filthy commie, just you got me. I don't fucking care. Go ahead, Jason.
I want to say this about the difference between the philosophies. Something that I like to point out to people that say, "Oh, well, the system's broke and or it was designed this way and all this shit." No, it wasn't. It wasn't designed this way, and the problems that we have are fundamental to our own behavior. And so, if you burned it all down and we founded a communist society, we're just going to regress back to the same oligarchy behaviors that we have now, because we're not addressing the problems that we have. It's how we behave and how we perceive things that is the reason that this shit works and breaks like it does. We've been doing the same thing for hundreds of years now, basically since the monarchy collapsed in Europe, and repeating the process in other countries. America has just hung on longer, I think. But people seem to want to found a state, then they hand over the enforcement of accountability to a single organization that then goes corrupt because they don't keep it in check. And it devolves into an oligarchy. And when you have a third world country with an extremely limited economy, that's just a few things, they just fly apart really easy. And there's plenty of examples around the world where we see this happen. That's an us problem. That's not a philosophy problem. So we need to address how we control accountability, because it's critical to how your society works. We ignore it. We act like it's not a big deal. But really, all these things that we talk about, like these economic issues, really come down to people are not being held accountable. And it's because we don't keep the system honest.
And also, like, so all of that, like, the system isn't. See, but this, to me, the system is the behavior of the people. To me, the system,
Yeah.
we could, like, try to, like, conceptually separate it from the people's actions, but it's the people's actions that make up the system. The system is a, like, compilation of action. So for me, I don't even separate the two, and I do think it was made this way by certain people, and I think that certain people's actions also enable it to remain this way. And I think that, like, I was part of that problem at one point, and I'm certainly still part of that problem occasionally. I'm not fucking perfect. Please, for the love of fuck, nobody be exactly like me. I am fucked up in here and out here. But at the same time, like, trying to do better, trying to push the needle.
Well, that's exactly what's important.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Look, anarchy or libertarianism, okay, it has a set of principles in it, and I take those principles very seriously. I try to model my life and my behaviors around those principles. I'm not perfect. I don't come anywhere near close to it. You know, I mean, these are very high ideals, man. But I try. I do what I can, and I think most people want to do good things and live a principled life, but they're just not familiar with these specific principles because, you know, that's just not something that most people are exposed to unless you pick up a fucking book. You actually have to, you know, seek these things out because they're not common philosophy in mainstream media. And they should be. The public forum is what created these ideas in Greek. You know, the Greek public forum, man, that's where this idea of self-governance was born, wasn't it?
Also, like, a lot of people in these places are just, like, repellent to a significant enough amount of people. Like, if I hear, and this is the thing, like, for instance, let's just say that, hypothetically, for a moment, a presidential candidate said that the last 4 mass shootings were committed by trans people. I will fucking hate that person. I don't care past that point. Once you're willing to pick on a minority and then fearmonger against that minority for leverage in your political dick measuring contest, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, it's common practice.
Like, I'll have an argument with anybody on politics, but dehumanizing other people is not a political belief. It's just a hate-filled one.
Yeah, I can find
ugly.
anyone, but another thing though, like if I see someone saying something wrong or like saying something about another person who I don't even like but is just wrong, I will argue with them. And then yeah, most, you know, stupid people are like, oh, why are you defending this guy? I'm like, no, fuck you. I'm not defending, you know, the person in question. You're just wrong. Like, it's the, you know, stop making me defend Donald Trump thing. Like, okay, fuck Trump, but you should hate him for the right reasons, god damn it.
Not Russiagate, which was disproven.
Yep. Uh-huh.
And so, like
propaganda is a powerful tool, man.
You've got, like, Russia, you've got, Trump, you've got take the guns first, due process second. You've got the border wall and the eminent domain that came with that, and the fact that he abused a bunch of migrants. You've got his fascist coddling of the Charlottesville bullshit. You've got his fascist coddling of a shit ton of other fascists. You've got his coddling of It's a really common theme in coddling dictatorial people and, like, people with dictatorial aspirations. But anyway, you've got, you know, his, like, expansion of the surveillance state. You've got his canceling of the drone reporting mandate that Obama put in. You've got, you know, his fucking, like, spying on, like, anarchists. And because MAGA people are gonna, you know, drip at the tip to say, I am no anarchist commie. Yeah, but he also spied on all militias. And he also especially spied on racists. So you, Cletus, can go fuck yourself. And so
like an oligarch.
Yeah,
he spat on everybody.
And so it's like that, and it's just he enabled the big mega corporations. He was if you hate the COVID regime, he enabled warp speed. He had Johnson & Johnson CEO on his fucking campaign stage. He had, every single possible principle you could claim to have as a conservative for defense of insert group here, family, religion, blah, blah, blah. He hates you. Stop sucking him off.
People project, because they'll like a particular candidate because they like something they say, and then they'll project all sorts of, traits that they wish that politician had onto them. Yeah. But I know, well, how many times has Trump thrown his supporters under the bus? He clearly does not give a shit about them, okay? The man is a textbook narcissist. He only cares about himself, but I guess, like kicked puppies, they keep going back because he seems like he's better than, the alternatives. Like, people were so fed up with the...
Here's my favorite thing. My favorite thing was on the debate stage. I'm sorry.
Oh, go for it.
When they were having the debate, and he said, I know that the system works this way because I use it. And people are like, yeah, he's so honest. And I was like, you have got to be fucking shitting me, man. Do you understand what he just said? What the fuck is wrong with y'all?
And you were going to talk about something people forgot. Dennis, you wanted to talk about what people forgot, like probably have a banger in this regard.
No, I was going to say people forget or don't talk about now is Project 2025. I mean, just knowing what he's saying there in Project 2025 that come out. Yeah, it's mind blowing. And if you don't know, I don't know how many people know this, but he's wanting to go into the executive branch, fire every single person in the executive branch that exists currently and replace them with people who are loyal to him, not to the Constitution, to him.
Exactly.
And believes that in the imperial presidency, where he is not answerable to Congress or the Supreme Court, he can do what he wants. Yeah. And he will have everybody in the executive branch loyal to him, will follow and do what he says. That was his biggest problem last time, was he had so many people who were saying, hey, wait a minute, you can't do that. And that's the only reason he got stopped from doing some of the worst things he was trying to do, was because he had enough people say, no, we're not going to do that. So now he's not going to have that problem anymore if he gets in again. Yep. And it's not going to be pretty.
No checks and balances on a fascist fuck Trump. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so it's almost 2.5 hours. I don't want to drag anybody out. Well, no, like 2.5 hours on the actual stream. We talked for 30 minutes before that. I don't want to drag this on and like everybody just ends up with an aneurysm at the end. Look, there were some disagreements. There are literally no hard feelings here. And I hope that like Jason, Archie, and Dennis can rejoin next Sunday, if you can, because we also have some other people interested as well. Not the least of which is potentially some people from the Lars campaign who are going to, talk about their perspective. It wouldn't be a Lars campaign ad. And you can also, by the way, what I'm hoping is next Sunday, we can get more people involved. And I'll try to keep it a little bit more structured because this got a little chaotic at certain points. But
and that's my fault.
No, it's hey, look, this is not any of you. This is the fact that sometimes I'm engrossed in the potential conflict, and my unhinged ass brain is like, let's let this play out. And sometimes it's, so it's nobody. I'm not saddling anybody with the chaos. I am the chaos guy. I've got a Sonic poster in the background. So, my point is, I'm hoping that y'all can recruit some libertarians to also talk philosophy next Sunday. We can really hammer down on some of the nuts and bolts, talk about some theory, talk about some stuff that we didn't discuss this time, and get real raw and serious about specific libertarian principles, especially the actual thinkers behind them. I think we laid some groundwork here for what we think people should do better. So now I think we should talk about the nuts and bolts of that next Sunday with as many people as possible. I don't know how many people Skype allows in a call. I'll try to, make sure that things get copacetic. But, like, what I am going to say is, I think that this was a productive conversation overall. I'm, like, deeply grateful that Dennis, Jason, and Archie showed up. Hody as always, Rose as always. And, like, I'm hoping next Sunday we can get even more people on and get more perspectives and really hammer down on some of these issues that matter, like, a lot more than a lot of libertarians want to claim they do, especially in certain circles that I can mention, maybe that banned me from their groups. So I think we could, like, there's certain problems in every libertarian circle, and, like, there's certain problems that need to be addressed, but I think the philosophy is what needs to be primarily focused on. And so next week, what I want to do is I want to talk about, like, certain philosophers in the old traditions, like, I want to talk about Bakunin and certain like leftist libertarians at the roots of a lot of this. I want to talk about Spooner. I want to talk about, like, some of the more modern right libertarians like Nock and Rothbard and Mises, and, like, I want to talk about as many of these things as possible, where they strayed, where they didn't. And I also want to talk
about the importance of Austrian economic analysis on modern market anarchist theory.
Yeah, we could do that too. Like, and this one might last a little longer, and I'm gonna actually
referencing an argument before the stream, by the way, for everyone else who was there.
Well, and we should be able to talk about all of this, like, relatively civilly. We should be able to come to libertarian conclusions together as libertarians, even if we don't agree on certain implementations, even if some of us are anarchist and some of us aren't, or because they think that, like, they are. To me, Dennis, like, let me just say this. To me, you're functionally anarchist. You're just a gradualist.
I can throw a bomb on that if you want.
Yeah, go for it. And throw a bomb on that, and we will start diffusing it next week, as well as also talking about all of these philosophies. I'm assuming that there's a shit ton that we can, like, start to talk about. So you can throw that bomb, and then we'll start to wrap up, give closing statements, and, like, I think that next week can be a lot more specific about philosophy, and I think that we can really nail down some of the stuff that we agree on and build bridges here. Because I think bridges are possible. Definitely.
So, you want me to do that now?
Go for
Throw
it.
The bomb? Okay. I brought this up with Free Talk Live probably 20 years ago when they were talking about this topic as well. And the way I envision things is that, let's say you have 3 people living in an area, right? And one of those people is a lot more powerful, has a lot more weapons, things like that. And it starts just taking stuff from one of the other 2 people. The 2 remaining people get together and decide to agree that they would join forces to stop that third person from basically violating their rights. Mm-hmm. As soon as they do that, they've created a government.
Well, I think
because they are 2 people agreeing on what a third person should or should not be able to do, whether they agree with the decision or not.
So I have my contentions with that, and we will have an entire week to theorize our own sides for this. I don't want it to be necessarily a debate, but we can also have that conversation, because I think a certain amount of conflicting conversation is necessary to authentic bridge building. So if you're down, we can do this again next week, bring in more people. What?
Mutual aid does not constitute a state. There's no administration.
It's still a government.
Well,
no, it's not.
It's not state, though. State and government are separate.
They're just stopping somebody from hurting somebody else. And if that is the extent of that state, then that's fine. I'm not against that.
And
exactly. So what I'm saying is that it's still a state. It's still a government. It's just a very, very minimal one, and possibly
who's funding it.
Well,
right.
That's
just key.
I'll talk about that next week, because I've got all the responses in the world for this particular subject. I've actually talked about this before.
I will see you on Sunday.
Right. All I'm saying there is that.
Yeah, exactly.
All I'm saying is that we can get into the details of, who's funding it, how it's taxing, how we make the decisions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just saying at the basic level, that's a government. And I think if we come to that agreement and say, okay, we start there and say that's something that we all agree with, then we can start redefining maybe what our anarchism is or what minimalists are. And I don't think that there has to be such a clash between the two, because I think essentially, as you were just saying, you thought that I might be an anarchist because I'm really kind of at that level, but I also don't like some of the terminology and the way we look at things and we start labeling each other on based off of it. And that's where I get into that.
Well, we have an entire week to prepare for a broader conversation on that. So, and I do hope to see you again as well, Archie. So let's start with closing statements, I guess. We'll go Archie, Archie, Rose, Dennis, Jason.
So that's an interesting bomb you threw, and I don't know if you saw in the chat, I said, is it a bomb or a Molotov cocktail? Yep. So yeah, I consider myself a minarchist because I can not put together in my own head any difference between an anarchist society which institutes institutional rules and a government. And I will say it also this way. When I talk with a lot of anarchists, and I say talk with, but I really mean argue, Twitter style, I get called a statist. But when I talk with normies, they're like, what are you, an anarchist? Lol. And when I say minarchist, I also mean literally the minimum amount of government we can get away with. Because there are bad people out there. There are, yes, anarchists will often come back with, yeah, because they get elected. Well, yes, I understand that. Bad people are attracted to power. That's why we need to change the incentive structure in government. But at the same time, absent any government, there are still going to be a type of people that are just criminals. They are wrong in and of themselves. They will murder, they will steal, they will rape, they will do these things because there is no one to stop them. And government, in my view, is an institutional attempt at stopping them.
Well, we will see next week. And also Nick Nunnally from the Lars campaign, he's in the chat right now, and he says he's a minarchist as well. So we'll need to get in some other anarchists and balance it out. But
of course, the Lars people are minarchists.
Rose.
Oh, well, I will just say I am guilty of bullying minarchists because it's fun to use them, just the tip daddy state. Like when I think of a minarchist, usually it means someone who wants, a small government, or they'll say small or limited government. Of course, none of them can agree on exactly what small or limited means. Usually people will justify all sorts of things if it's something they personally like. I want the government to try this or to ban this thing I personally dislike. In general, though, they want, at the very least, they want the state to be, to have a monopoly on, military and policing. Those are the very things that a state needs to grab more power and to grow in size and scope. So I personally think, having a society where you deliberately institutionalize the initiation of force and grant, one entity a monopoly on it is going to just cause you to end up right back where we are now. Of course. You always hear, oh, well, then they'll just be warlords. Okay, the state is the band of warlords that won. So basically the argument is, okay, in the absence of a state, other entities might start acting like the state. And again, that doesn't mean you're not going to have organized self-defense. You could have self-defense co-ops. You could have, hired security guards to defend your community. But there are options. The difference between that and a state, though, is whether or not they're trying to, dictate whether or not, what people are and are not allowed to do, on their own property or in the privacy of their own homes. They're not, forcing the members of their community to pay them, a percentage of their income just, for the privilege of living on territory that they've just arbitrarily decided it should be theirs, despite, having not mixed their labor with it or acquired it in a voluntary transaction. So, yeah, this should be interesting. If we want to bring on more anarchists and minarchists next week.
Yeah, and you can bring on some Mises people as well. Like that's the thing. I want this channel to be a hub. I want this channel to be a place where not only can people hear from my fucking insane, like, unhinged ass, like, on the occasional, like, solo video, but, on the occasional, like, solo video, but also where they can hear a kind of conversation that they can't hear otherwise, where people are still trying to reach the bridge conclusion. Like, fuck blood sports. Like, yeah, there should be some sort of debate, but that should be a debate. It shouldn't be a fucking spat or an argument, like, that doesn't conclude in any sort of understanding. Like, at the very least, I want things to come together. So even if they're Mises Caucus, who has expelled me like Bakunin from the First International, then, they can be, like, my problem is with this lack of communication. So I want to get as many people on as possible. And in that spirit, Dennis.
So I guess closing thoughts for me would be, I don't know if we want to talk about this, but I know a lot of people will say that, minarchism leads to what we have now, so it didn't stop it, so therefore we shouldn't allow it to begin with. I've always found that the natural state of humans before there was government was anarchism, and it led to government. So, and it always does and always will, because that's the nature of human beings, is they want order and they want the rules to be there, and that's what's going to happen. It's just like communism's a great idea. It just goes against human nature, and it's the same thing when you start talking about states too. So that's kind of where I go there. Also, I have been thinking a lot over the decades of being a libertarian, and I didn't come to libertarianism by reading libertarian works and stuff like that. I believed in that basic philosophy that everybody should be free to live their lives as long as it's not hurting anybody else. That kind of puts me in a weird situation where I've been looking at things in a different way, I think, over these last decades, and reading some of the things that people have written and then finding flaws in most of it, and kind of come to my own kind of view and conclusion on those things. So I tend to come across as kind of like not in any kind of camp or anything like that. I've never been part of a caucus. I never will be a part of a caucus. I don't like them. I think they're horrible because they just create division and us against them attitudes. The same way I feel about anarchism against statism type thing. It's just, I think it's a way to separate people. And I even started at one point as a joke. I started the anarcho statist caucus or something. I can't remember what it was called now. But it was kind of like a
vaguely familiar.
But I did that as a joke. And but yeah, that's kind of how I looked at things. Is that I think there's a whole way of looking at these things that I don't think any of the people who we're talking about with the philosophies and the writings and stuff like that none of them have gotten it, in my opinion. I think there's flaws everywhere in that, and I just see things in a whole different way. So whether that's good or bad, I don't know.
And
I remember my very first meme, by the way, my second meme, actually, my first meme was about Tony Nathan that I still see getting tossed around every once in a while, which is really great. But the other one is I had a picture of Ayn Rand and a picture of Robert Heinlein, and said, this one on the left, who's Ayn Rand is an objectivist. Robert Heinlein was a libertarian. Learn to know the difference between the two. So that's kind of how I look at her. So
yeah,
too easy. Although, go ahead.
Real quick, the who didn't read libertarian theory? The original libertarians, because they were the ones to start writing it. And so it's always funny to me when people are like, but at the same time, like, there's a place for it. I think that when you get down to brass tacks, when you start to think about these things, like, from a variety of perspectives, the people who wrote it down, the people who were insane enough to actually compile their ideas, there's some value there. What were you gonna say, Rose? And then quickly, and then we'll do Jason and sort of close it up.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the whole anarchism versus minarchism thing because, it's fun, it's just internet blood sports. But yeah, at the end of the day, okay, wow, so you win an argument on the internet, and meanwhile, yeah, you've got one of the biggest, most oppressive states and empires to have ever existed, stripping you of more and more of your rights, by the day. So, okay, yeah.
I'm telling you, bring me the horizon. They were right.
To what we have now.
Yeah, like it's either been powerless. It's either been like powerless to prevent it, or the reason we have what we have now. In either case, it's unfit to exist. Right? The Spooner principles.
Back to anarchism. Like he's the one that really sealed the deal for me because you cannot come up with a counter argument to no treason. Like, yeah, that you can't refute it.
Yeah. Anyway, Jason. And then we'll stew on the rage of the things that have been said in this final component until next week on whatever this is.
Okay, well, I advocate anarchism because I think logically it is the most sound of the philosophies that I've read and understand the principles of. But in reality, I think we're just going to be with whatever the prevailing perspective gives us, man. It's just a social evolution is a thing. And so is propaganda. I wish we could do something about that, but I think that's out of our control at the moment. I try to live by these philosophies, this philosophy, like I said, but I think it's an impossible goal. And but like religion, people adopt these philosophies of religion that are you can't live like that. I mean, you can try to and be a really good person doing it and all, but you can't meet all of those goals, just like you can't meet all the these hardline principles of a philosophy like anarchy. But letting people learn about them and understand them is what will shift and change society. If there's going to be a shift and change, it'll be because people adopt new perspectives based on these kinds of philosophies. That's you can slow that down with propaganda, but you can't stop it. If you could stop it, then we'd still be living under a monarchy because they were burning people who said bad things about divine right. But you know what? Yeah, we can kick that shit right in the fucking nuts anyway. It doesn't matter. You can't stop these evolutions. Anyway, that's my perspective. I think it's just all about accountability. Once the perspective shifts, we change the way we hold people accountable and how we do it.
Yeah, and just to put a cap in that, just before we go, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of statelessness. Smash the fucking state.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.